to today's City Council meeting. We are grateful to have you joining us. As you probably have seen, we are continuing to hold our lovely electronic meetings due to the practice of social distancing. Although conducting our meetings electronically is different, I'm going to take this line out of the script because at this point, a year later, it's not really that different. I mean, it certainly is different, but we're getting used to it. So even though we are electronic, this is still an open meeting and it's open to the public, and we encourage you to join us for our work session. We have a formal session later this evening at 7 o'clock. We would like to welcome members of the public who may be watching our usual video feeds on the council's agenda page, YouTube, SLC TV, or Facebook Live. As many of you know, there is no public comment during a work session, but as I mentioned, we do have our formal session at 7 p.m. and we will be taking comments at that time during our general comment period. However, if you do have feedback, it is always welcome. We encourage feedback, and you can reach us at the city. You can reach the City Council anytime by mailing us at P.O. Box 145476, Salt Lake City, Utah 84114, or emailing us at council.comments@slcgov.com. You can also call our 24-hour phone comment line at 801-535-7654. Now we will move on to our first agenda item. Our first agenda item is updates from the administration. Mayor, I will go ahead and turn the time over to you. Again, thank you for being here and for always joining us at our council meetings. We appreciate it. So the floor is yours, Mayor.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Happy Tuesday, City Council. I believe at the top of our normal update, we're going to do the COVID update, and Lisa Schaefer is going to do that. And then I'll go into a homeless update after that.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate the opportunity to update the council and the public on what we know about COVID, and especially today, what we know about the vaccinations and the rollout of the vaccinations through the County Health Department. Currently, we know that the County Health Department has allotted vaccines to healthcare workers, long-term care facilities, faculty and staff and residents, first responders ages 70 and older, and K through 12 teachers and school staff. The County Health Department is reporting that they have administered or at least offered that first dose to all of the eligible parties with the exception of the K through 12 teachers and school staff. They are making outreach to determine how they can reach the remainder of that initial group. And then they're also beginning outreach to determine how city employees who may meet the definition of K through 12 staff can receive a vaccine if the supply has not already been allocated. And for more information about the actual rollout of the vaccinations, residents can visit coronavirus.utah.gov/vaccine-distribution. It's a mouthful. So far, with city employees, we have a handful of employees that have been offered the vaccination. So at the airport, specifically in the control center, the landside and terminal operations area where there's high contact with the public, 90 eligible employees have received dose 1, and they will begin dose 2 this week. In our 911 dispatch area, 65 employees have received the first dose, 11 employees have received the second dose, and we will continue with that vaccination protocol. In the fire department, 280 of our employees have received the first dose, 120 of our employees have received the second dose, and will continue. In the police department, 443 of our employees have received the first dose. Approximately 50% of employees have received the second dose, and we will continue. As of this time, we have 950 of our eligible employees that have utilized the Emergency Responder Pandemic Leave. We've been calling it ERPL, if you're used to us calling it that. and 215 of our employees have utilized the emergency pandemic leave. This was the federal aid offered to employees nationwide. So that's 1,165 of our total eligible employees have used some kind of pandemic leave, which equates to about 34, just over 34% of our total employees. So that's it for COVID and vaccinations. Unless you have any questions, I'll pass it back to the mayor.
Mayor, if I may just really quickly, I think it would be good for us as council members that have Facebook pages or our email blasts to get some of that vaccine information, Lisa, and maybe put it on our city council webpage and Facebook and kind of get that information out there. So I know we could probably all find it, but it's nice to make sure that we're trying to keep our constituents educated on this. So maybe we could get some of that information and work with our staff to get that on our various social medias.
Absolutely. Happy to help. Thanks, Madam Chair.
Thanks, Lisa. Sorry, Madam Mayor.
No apology necessary. I'll move on to our homelessness update. And I'm going to start with a link in the chat. I hope that's the right link. I think it is. Because yesterday, folks from our administration hosted an AMA on homelessness and answered a lot of questions and beliefs that are in the community. So I encourage you to share it if you want it. Hopefully you had a chance to watch it or you can check it out, because I think it goes into great depth that it's in that unique format that we really need to get out some of the realities of what we're doing to the public. So our work, as you know, is always to make homelessness rare, brief, and non-recurring. And at the same time, to keep our public spaces clean and safe and accessible for everyone. So one of the pieces of work around transparency and providing more transparency in the homelessness services system is this dashboard that we've been working on. And council members, I don't know if you've seen it yet, but I'm going to put that in the chat right now. And I remember as a council member when the homeless resource centers were cited, that we talked about the desire to have one place, one website online that would have continuously updated numbers about beds available. And so I'm really excited that now we actually have as close to that as we can, given that the city doesn't own or operate the homeless resource centers. Bed availability is on that dashboard. It's updated as it becomes available from the Utah Homeless Management Information System, or HIMIS. I'm understanding today that they haven't updated it since the 28th, but as soon as it gets updated, it gets onto our website. And that the website, the dashboard includes obviously the shelter capacity, transportation, contact information, storage, where people, the place for your stuff information, and also where a map of where the city has received calls for service related to homelessness. And it goes back 30 days, 90 days, and it distinguishes those. So you can kind of see where the community is asking for assistance. We wish that we could provide real-time shelter numbers, but the way that the resource centers manage the walk-in beds and the case managed beds makes that impossible for them to give real-time numbers. So the best we can do is to get this percentage of available beds for the previous night. And that's what that chart shows. It's important that, and you'll see that on the chart, it doesn't reflect every bed in the entire system. It doesn't include the Mill Creek temporary winter housing location or the Salt Lake City temporary winter housing location, which together are about 210 beds in addition to the ones that you see on the dashboard. There's also detox and treatment beds available that our outreach workers can offer people to get to. And we're hearing from our county partners recently that there's quite a bit of availability with detox at this moment. If there aren't any questions, thank you. Thank you, daughter. Sorry. She brings me things. If there are questions, I'm happy to take it. Otherwise, I want to talk to you about the large encampments and CDC guidelines. Is that okay, Madam Chair?
Of course, let me, council members, are there any questions for the mayor just on that first part with that she spoke about? Excellent. Yeah, please continue, Mayor. Thank you.
Great. Then I'm going to put up my next link. I'm just going to keep giving you links. This one is to the CDC large encampments guidelines, or really just unsheltered encampment guidelines. We have consistently, over the last couple of months, especially since the community commitment program, received comments about wondering about the CDC guidelines regarding leaving unsheltered homeless encampments in place. And early in the pandemic, we started coordinating with our outreach partners and the county counterparts to talk about what our plan was going to be for response to homelessness and our COVID in the homeless community. The CDC guidelines are much more nuanced than just stating that all encampments should be left undisturbed. That's not what they state. The CDC encourages that cities and health departments and service providers do an assessment of other risks to the encampment. Other important measures are suggested, including an emphasis on connecting people to housing and shelter options and using quarantine and isolation facilities, which, as you know, have been operating in the city since the summer. Other important guidelines that we've been following and we're using to assess the risk of large encampments include these three things: the balance of these risks when addressing options for decreasing COVID-19 spread. So those who are experiencing unsheltered homelessness face several risks to their health and safety, and our partners at the health department are weighing those different risks. We're also discouraging clients from spending time in crowded places or gathering in large groups, for example, at locations where food, water, or hygiene supplies are being distributed, and encouraging those staying in encampments to set up their tents and sleeping quarters with at least 12 feet by 12 feet of space per individual. The county health department, with our support and service provider support, has been consistent in determining that large encampments often pose a greater public safety and health risk to campers because of the bio-waste, the garbage, and discarded drug paraphernalia that are in the area. Those immediate risks in large encampments are more critical, and small encampments don't pose as large of a risk often, and those are often left alone, other than service provider outreach with the individuals there. So we hope that this helps to clear up how we've been working with our partners to evaluate those CDC guidelines and try to make the best health decision in terms of operations, whether it's strictly service engagement or the health department goes ahead with a camp abatement. Are there any questions about that?
Council members? Anna, is that a question?
Another thing that I'm not sure if it's clear about this, the risk that these encampments pose for the people on the encampments is rodents. Is that part of the CDC discussion as well, like the attraction of rodents, either rats or mice, that we did see here on 7th South?
Yes, so great point, council member. And when I mentioned very vaguely that balancing of other risks when addressing options for decreasing the spread, the several risk factors to health and safety definitely include the attraction of rodents that can also spread other health risks to the population. And as you know, that the county with the animal services are also our partners with their other hat on in dealing with that human interface.
Thank you.
Thank you. Madam Chair, I have one more item on homelessness around Camp Last Hope, if you're ready for me to go there.
Yes, please. I almost said Your Honor. I was in court earlier today, but yes, please, Mayor.
The Camp Last Hope, as you know, is on private property. It's going to be closed to camping tomorrow. Our team has been working directly with the camp organizers to keep them informed of the plans for closure and make sure that the people in the camp have plenty of time to remove any of the belongings they want to take with them. So it'll be closed to camping beginning tomorrow, but the abatement has been briefly postponed until Thursday. And that will allow people to remove their belongings before the area is cleaned. And that, again, was part of the collaborative work that we've been doing with the organizers. Service providers are holding a resource fair today and tomorrow to connect people to shelter and other services, including Justice Court. So, Madam Chair, that is the update on homelessness. And if there's any questions on Camp Last Hope, I can try. Otherwise, we'll move on to the policing update.
I have one question about Last Hope. Where are they? Where do they go to relieve themselves at that camp? Is that also part of the problem? There's no bathrooms in that camp.
Bathrooms were brought in by the organizers, and
Okay.
I
Oh, okay.
can't tell you whether or not they're still there today.
Okay.
Perhaps Rachel knows, but
I didn't see them when I drove by, but
Madam Chair,
Yes, Andrew.
sorry, I'm faceless for a second. I was just down there this morning and the bathrooms are there and Advantage Services is still on site.
okay.
And in this collaborative effort with the camp organizers, is there a plan for where people are going to go once Camp Hope is closed?
yeah, so the service providers have been consistently trying to connect and working to connect people in the camp with shelter options or housing options. And with the resource fair today and tomorrow, those options are still out there on the table for people who want to go into shelter or perhaps into detox or whatever their particular needs are. So that those connections have been consistent.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from council members? Okay, I'll turn it back over to you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. The transitioning to the policing update, I wondered if you might allow me to read what is, I hope to be a joint resolution with the council that recognizes Salt Lake City Police Department's hostage negotiation team and Community Connection Center Director and social worker Jessica Waters. We're going to have copies of it delivered to the police department for each member of the team in the next few days. And I know that Sergeant Mason Givens, who's the team lead, is with us to acknowledge this resolution and recognize his team.
Please, Madam Mayor, and I don't know that we have gotten back to you, but I do anticipate that this will be a joint resolution. We've heard from council members, and so yes.
Great.
We just haven't had a chance to touch base before the meeting started.
Great. Do you mind if I go ahead? Sorry, I can't see you because I'm looking at the resolution.
Oh, sorry. Yep, I did. Go ahead.
Joint resolution applauding the work of Salt Lake City Police Department hostage negotiation team and Director Jessica Waters. Whereas members of the Salt Lake City Police Department are regularly called upon when residents' lives are endangered, and whereas Salt Lake City Police Department has a highly trained hostage negotiation team composed of officers who are specifically tasked with responding to dynamic hostage situations. And whereas the hostage negotiation team works directly with people in crisis who are greatly distressed, and whereas the hostage, what we call it the HNT, currently includes the following officers: Lieutenant Derek Diamond, Sergeant Mason Givens, Sergeant Scott Hall, social worker Jessica Waters, Detective Joseph Taylor, Detective Marie Stewart, Detective Josh Harris, Detective Matt Voorhees, and Detective Dave Sontag. And whereas the Salt Lake City Police Department has prioritized responding appropriately to those with mental health struggles by establishing the Community Connection Center, a valuable city resource that aims to provide a safe environment for people to access individualized care, support, community resources, and an alternative to a law enforcement only response to crisis. And whereas Jessica Waters serves as the director of the Salt Lake City Police Department's Community Connection Center and leads a team of social workers who work directly with the public. And whereas as a trained social worker, Director Waters has vast expertise working with people experiencing life challenges and mental health crises. And whereas Director Waters recently furthered her education and added depth to the Salt Lake City Police Department's HNT by becoming trained as a negotiator. And whereas on the evening of Friday, January 22nd, 2021, a dangerous situation occurred in Salt Lake City involving an armed individual barricaded in a home with his young children. And whereas the Salt Lake City Police Department's HNT swiftly responded to assist and protect the innocent lives inside and relied upon their professional judgment by requesting assistance from Director Waters, as the individual expressed his distrust in police officers. And whereas Director Waters exhibited bravery, compassion, and patience in communicating with the agitated individual. And whereas Director Waters and her SLCPD colleagues worked together throughout the negotiation, and whereas Director Waters and the HNT were able to successfully diffuse the potentially violent situation, resulting in a positive outcome for the victims and the on-site first responders, now therefore be it resolved that Salt Lake City express deep appreciation for the entire hostage negotiation team, and particularly Director Waters for their dedicated work, committed compassion, and successful de-escalation during a highly stressful situation, ensuring the safety and well-being of Salt Lake City's residents. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mayor. And I just want to say that I truly appreciate that the team and Jessica Waters, she certainly, the whole team really works hard for our residents, and Jessica has such a passion for what she is doing with her role as the director of social services, social worker there with that department, and had a wonderful opportunity to meet in a small group with her. And then we had a briefing a few weeks ago, and just a lot of passion coming out of that department to really keep our residents safe in all aspects, I think, as much as possible. So thank you, Mayor. I appreciate that. All right. Any further updates, Mayor, for that agenda item number 1?
Yes. And Rachel is up with the legislative update. And that'll be it for our updates.
Thank you. Thanks, Madam Chair. Could we give Sergeant Givens a moment to recognize his team?
I'm so sorry. Yes, thank you, Rachel. Sorry, Sergeant Givens, I sort of saw you on there, and then I apologize. Please, the floor is yours.
No worries, Madam Councilperson. Excuse me. First and foremost, thank you. This is a very kind gesture. It's very timely, and it's been very well received by members of my team. So thank you for taking your time to honor us today. As you laid out in that proclamation, it was very detailed and very accurate. There were many members of our agency that were on that scene, and it's important to acknowledge their actions as well, with both patrol, the tactical SWAT team, also the public relations unit. They were all there. We all had the common goal of working towards peace. That's the important thing. I do credit our success to patience, persistence, and professionalism. And as stated in the proclamation, there were some standouts. So again, I'd like to echo what you said. Director Waters is fantastic. She's great to work with. She took this on head on, had no hesitation jumping in that seat, and was exactly what we needed in that situation. Was able to say the same things that Detective Taylor was saying as a police officer, but able to reach because didn't have that law enforcement perspective there. So it was just a great situation all around. One other person that deserves credit is Lieutenant Diamond for thinking long term. He's an experienced negotiator, but also an experienced tactician. And he kind of saw something like this coming in the future, and was the one to introduce and to bring Jessica to the team. So not all law enforcement agencies have this resource. We're very lucky in Salt Lake City, and that is due to the leadership of Lieutenant Diamond. And just so everyone is aware, my team loves their job. They are fully invested in effective communication. They go the extra mile. They love to de-escalate the impossible and help bring back perspective and create opportunities. So it's important that you know this is what we train for, and we're going to be ready the next time you call. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your acknowledgement. I really feel privileged to represent the full membership of my team and to receive this honor from you. So I sincerely hope you all are as proud of my folks as I am of them.
Madam Chair, may I, well said, Mason. I'm so proud of you and your team. And I think what we haven't said, which should be abundantly clear, is this is a part of the evolution of Salt Lake City Police Department. This is what makes our department the best department in the state of Utah, if not beyond, because this is what we're working for. How do we get more peaceful resolution? How do we get better at de-escalating? Let's have someone who's a social worker, who's not a law enforcement officer, get trained in negotiation and be able to come into these highly volatile situations. And I'm just really proud of the department and everybody on your team for seeing that need and then getting the training, making it happen, and making all the difference in the world for the kids and the parent in that situation.
Oh, Mayor, okay, my computer was a little strange. So were you finished because it muted? And then but I could still see you. So I don't know if it was just slower.
I was finished, and I think my internet is not good.
Yeah, you're cutting in and out kind of a little bit. So, okay, well, thank you. Thank you, Rachel, for reminding me. Thank you, Detective Givens. And I'll turn it.
Actually, thank you, Madam Chair, but I think the legislative update is a little bit further down on the agenda, so I will wait for my turn. Thanks.
You're welcome. And it is, but I didn't know if you had something special planned for us. So, okay, with that, we will go to the second agenda item, which is updates on racial equity and policing. And we have Kira, and then I believe Kira Duke from the council staff, and then I believe Ben Ludke will have some report after Kira as well. So Kira, the floor is yours.
Thank you for this opportunity to just keep the council in the loop. The Racial Equity and Policing Commission will next be meeting as subcommittees tomorrow, Wednesday, February 3rd. The Policies and Practices Subcommittee meets at 4 p.m., as does the School Safety Subcommittee. There's also a Training Subcommittee that meets at 5 p.m. The next full commission meeting will be Wednesday, February 10th at 5 p.m. All of these meetings are available for the public to listen to through links at slcrepcommission.com. The public is also invited to share feedback with the commission through that webpage. It's slcrepcommission.com or by texting 801-575-7755, where anyone from the public can take a brief survey and give some feedback. A recording of last week's community listening session is now available for anyone who missed it or wants to listen again. You can find that on youtube.com/slctvmedia. In the meantime, the commission's facilitators are working on responses to all the questions they received from the public during the listening session. When the compiled questions and answers are complete, we'll send that to the council, and it'll also be posted online for the public. Staff is also coordinating an opportunity this month for the Police Department Budget Audit Consultant to brief the Racial Equity and Policing Commission. The final scheduling for that will be up to the commission, but we'll keep the council posted. And with that, I'll turn it over to Ben for an update on that audit.
Thank you. The data collection list, as well as the Gantt chart showing the timeline moving forward, are both available on the audit page of the council website, and I'll post a link in the chat. The organization profile of the police department is anticipated to be completed in the next week or two. This is one of the first deliverables from the audit. The profile will have details for each function within the police department, such as the service levels, staffing by type, and whether the position is vacant or filled, performance indicators for service delivery when they're available, budgets and how they are structured for the function, an inventory of vehicles and equipment for the delivery of that service, and other details by function. The police department profile will also be added to the council website. I put the link in the chat. And I want to emphasize that as the audit progresses, we will continue to add the deliverables to that website, so it's all in one place. The next audit items after the profile is completed is reviewing the internal affairs division and processes, as well as the disciplinary system, and categorizing line item costs. That's my update, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Ben. Council members, do you have any questions for either Kira or Ben? Okay, moving on. Let's see, we have item number 3, which is our state legislative briefing. I see Kate Bradshaw joined us, and I don't know, Rachel, there you are, you're here as well. So I don't know if you want me to turn it over to you, Kate, or to Rachel. So you guys flip a coin and decide.
I'll take it because Kate is masked, so it'll just be easier for me to start talking. She can't even say anything about it. Kate is here, and I know that Cindy Gus Jensen and Katie Lewis can also chime in on whatever they feel is appropriate, but just a quick update for the council. We are continuing to track and advocate for and against dozens of bills that relate to our top city priorities. Affordable housing, homelessness, transparency, law enforcement, and sustainability, to name some of the tops. So I just wanted to go through a few subject matters, and Kate can jump in, particularly on the law enforcement issues that she's much more in tune with than I am. So on the affordable housing front, the mayor testified this morning in support of a $30 million appropriations request for affordable housing projects. That is brought by Senator Kitchen and Representative Collard. Our community and neighborhoods policy team is monitoring the 2 accessory dwelling unit bills that have been introduced that I know that council has been paying attention to as well. Those are HB 82 and HB 273. So HB 273 just came out yesterday, so I don't think that we've done a lot of engagement on that yet, but HB 82 is something that's being thoroughly worked on by the Utah League of Cities and Towns, and the Community and Neighborhoods team has also provided comments, technical comments on various components of that bill with council's input. So single family, the land use act, the loan program that's contemplated in that bill, and the impact fee component. So we will continue to monitor and recommend some reasonable amendments to that bill to try to balance the needs of our existing neighborhoods with the need that we have for affordable housing. So it's not always the easiest balance, but we appreciate your engagement on that topic and your feedback on that bill so far. We'll keep you posted on developments with HB 273 as well. The Housing Affordability Commission bill and the the state homeless officer bill are supposed to be released this week. They haven't been publicly released yet. I know that Councilmember Johnston is involved with the Commission on Housing Affordability and is probably well aware of the components of that bill, but we will monitor and we'll look forward to seeing precisely the language and the various provisions in those bills. And as always, we'll continue to advocate for more state investments into affordable housing and homeless services. Kate, do you want to take law enforcement? There's there's a lot of law enforcement bills coming from different sponsors that all involve sort of the same areas. So I feel like we have a lot of work to do in the next few weeks on those bills.
Sure. Can you hear me okay with my mask?
Yes.
Okay. So in keeping with the requirements, we'll keep the mask on unless it becomes too hard to hear me. There are a lot of law enforcement bills that have been introduced. It is by far the largest category of bills introduced this year. And on any particular slice of law enforcement, there are a couple different ideas that have been introduced dealing with, how best to tackle that particular issue. There is some effort by both the House and the Senate to group bills together, and so that if they're all dealing with the same topic, say for instance, de-escalation training, that they all are in the same committee hearing together so that they can advance one of the bills that makes the most sense rather than all of the bills. So that process, that kind of sifting of grouping the bills into the different law enforcement subcategories is actively taking place. There are a handful of bills I thought I would quickly highlight for you that I think would be of interest to you. Some of these we've covered in other meetings, but I think they speak to some of the priorities for Salt Lake City. The first is SB 13, Law Enforcement Internal Investigation Requirements by Senator Iwamoto. The city is in a support position, and it deals with finishing the investigations of any officer, so that if they were to leave and go to a different police department, those records and things like that would follow with them, and any of those issues would be complete in the record. The next, HB 84, Use of Force Reporting Amendments by Representative Romero. City's in a support position. This one would allow for the collection of better data on use of force, so that everyone is using the same FBI standards in reporting that data on use of force. Hopefully that would ultimately then lead to better policies by having better underlying data to pull from. Next, HB 162, Peace Officer Training Amendments, again by Representative Romero with a support position. And this is to enhance training on mental health issues, crisis situations, and de-escalation policies. Two more in the law enforcement category, HB 264, Law Enforcement Weapons Use Amendments, again by Representative Romero with a support position. And this one would deal with reforms on transparency and reporting whenever an officer points their gun or their taser at a person. And then finally, the last one, and this one is something I think the city is probably excited about and has been very supportive of. SB 102, Peace Officer Training Qualifications, sponsored by Senator Maine. This would allow someone who is a legal resident to join the police department. They have people that are in that legal resident category haven't been able to join the police department. They can join the military, but not the police department. And so there are some individuals that have been interested in doing so. And there's also an amendment coming that would also include police dispatchers being able to be legal residents and join the department. So those are just a handful of some of the law enforcement bills that we are tracking and supporting that align with the direction from the elected officials.
Madam Chair, I wanted to give another quick update on a couple of bills, unless there are questions on the law enforcement bills specifically that we should address.
I don't see any hands, Rachel, so go ahead, please.
Thanks. As you all know, land use bills are always high priority for cities in general, including Salt Lake City. I don't want to go into great detail about a bunch of land use issues, but I do want to flag for you two pretty concerning billboard bills that we are tracking. They're both in the Senate, and one just came out yesterday. So again, there hasn't been a lot of engagement on the bill that came out yesterday specifically. But just in brief, between the two bills, they would essentially remove all authority that a government entity has to regulate billboards or even require permits for any upgrades, including digitizing billboards. So they, as you know, billboards already have more rights than any other land use in Utah, but don't pay any property taxes. And this would give them even more super special property rights. Salt Lake City has over 200 billboards, mostly located in Central City and the northwestern part of the city. So we're obviously worried that if these legislative efforts are successful, all of these billboards would have the right to digitize without any restrictions. And this could definitely have some pretty serious impacts on quality of life for a lot of our residents, particularly residents who are finding new homes in quickly developing areas of our city and Central City where we're seeing dense residential development. So this could become a pretty big equity issue for us as we are trying to, balance the needs of developers and people who need moderate and lower income housing, as well as housing at all income levels, and other priorities that we, want to promote in the city. So we're tracking those closely. We're hoping to keep you very carefully in the loop on those. And yeah, any questions about those?
Again, I don't see any hands, but I do appreciate that update and certainly appreciate us paying attention to those billboard billboard bills. And I would encourage, if council members have not seen the billboard map that was emailed out to us, it is public information. It's something that if constituents are interested in where billboards are, I think I was checking it out the other day, and it is quite interesting. Obviously, there's a lot of billboards along our freeways, but there are quite a bit of billboards in areas that I would say don't have as high of maybe property taxes as other areas, which is an interesting equity question, as Rachel brought up. And so I would encourage you to all look at that billboard map and kind of pay attention to these bills as well. Obviously, if there's any questions from council members that come up, I'm offering Rachel and Kate to their services to answer those questions, and of course all of the other lobbyists that we have working with us, but particularly Kate can point us in the right directions if you have questions. Yes, Andrew.
All right, Madam Chair, could I go back to the law enforcement discussion for a quick sec?
No, sorry, we're over that. I'm just kidding. Yes, of course you can.
You let me know when we're ready. I know there was a bill proposed to increase the minimum educational standards for public employees, I think in general. Has that come out, or do we know details on it yet?
Yes, that bill has come out, and it's been significantly modified, actually. The League of Cities and Towns led negotiations on that issue. And so the minimum education standards are now focused on the state. And then the state Department of Human Resources is supposed to create some guides that local governments can use if they want to. So that's what evolved in the substitute bill. It is Representative Thurston that is carrying that bill.
Kate, if you
Thank
have
you.
a second, I don't know if everyone's aware of what that bill originally stated. If you could maybe give just a little bit of background quickly on that, if you have a moment.
Sure, I'm just pulling it up real quick. So it's HB 139. If you want to find it on the tracker. So originally it would have required minimum. It would have said you can't have these minimum education standards. So for some of your departments that maybe require engineering backgrounds in the public utilities or arena, things like that, that probably would have created a significant burden so that you could ensure that you got qualified people. I think Representative Thurston's policy perspective is that if people can prove they can do the job via training or background or other things, that he wants to lower barriers to entry of various jobs. But there was general concern, I think, on the part of local governments that there are qualification standards and education standards, often for very good reasons, and that local governments would know best when those ought to be applied to positions.
Thanks, Kate.
I would also note that bill was heard in interim and not advanced as a committee bill, but he still wanted to bring it forward.
Great. Thank you, Kate. Are there any other questions for Kate or Rachel on our legislative updates? I don't see any hands. Good luck up at the Capitol, Kate.
Thank you. I'll head back up to the rotunda.
All right. We are on agenda item number 4. This is a zoning amendment at Lincoln Street and 200 South. It looks like I have Brian Fulmer from our council office and Kelsey Lindquist, the senior planner, plus other members of CAN and planning. So I'll turn it over first to Brian and we'll go from there. Thanks, Brian.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, council members. This rezone request is for properties at 159 South Lincoln Street, which is approximately 945 East, and also properties at 949, 955, 959, and 963 East, 200 South. So they're on the corner of Lincoln Street and 200 South. The applicant is requesting amendments to the zoning map and Central Community Master Plan future land use map from the current R2, which is single and two-family residential zoning, to RMF 35, or moderate density multifamily residential zoning. The property owners are requesting these changes because they stated they would like to have more flexibility in developing future multifamily housing with greater density and height than is currently allowed under the existing zoning. Under the proposed plan, the existing structures on the parcels would be removed for the new building. The Planning Commission forwarded a unanimous negative recommendation for these amendments to the City Council. And with that, I will turn it over to Kelsey.
Good afternoon. Can the presentation be pulled up? Perfect. Thank you. Okay. As Brian mentioned, this is a proposal which includes 2 requests. The first to amend the zoning map designation from R2, which is the single and two-family residential, to RMF 35, which is a moderate density residential multifamily zoning district. And the second request is to amend the Central Community Master Plan future land use map from low density residential, which is designated as 1 to 15 dwelling units per acre, to medium density residential, which is designated as 15 to 30 dwelling units per acre. The subject properties are 159 South Lincoln, 949 East, 955 East, 959 East, and 963 East, 200 South. The 5 parcels total 0.682 acres in size. And as Brian mentioned, the amendments are being requested to construct a multifamily building with a greater density and height than the existing zoning would permit. Next slide, please. Thank you. The existing zoning is R2. As the image illustrates, the subject area consists of a variety of residential zoning districts. The primary land uses that surround the subject properties include single-family residential, low-scale multifamily, and some moderate-scale multifamily. The multifamily structures are located along 200 South as well as 1000 East. The intensity of land uses fluctuates along 200 South. Generally, the more intense uses are located closer to 7th East corridor, with smaller scaled and less intense residential uses moving east towards 1000 East. Next slide, please. The properties are located within the Central Community Master Plan, which was adopted in 2005. The future land use map designated the properties as low density residential, and the applicant is requesting to modify this designation to medium density residential. The Community Master Plan designated the subject properties as low density residential to preserve the existing low density residential uses and residential character of the area. The higher density housing is encouraged in East Downtown, Downtown Gateway, and the transit station development zoning areas. Next slide. And just for reference, I will quickly go through a few photos of the properties. The first photo is 949 East and then 955 East. Next slide. The moving east, this is 959 and 963 East. Next slide. And 159 South Lincoln, and the surface parking area associated with 949 East. Next slide, please. Okay, for a quick comparison between the existing and the requested zoning district, the R2 zoning permits single and two family uses. This district requires a minimum of 5,000 square feet for a single family structure and 8,000 square feet for a duplex. The height is also limited to 28 feet for a pitched roof and 20 feet for a flat roof. The minimum lot area required for development in the R2 district limits the existing properties from increasing in density, and redevelopment would be unlikely under the existing zoning. The RMF 35 requires 9,000 square feet for 3 units, plus an additional 2,000 square feet for each additional unit to 11. And then subsequent requirements as you increase in square footage. If the 5 properties were consolidated and redeveloped, a maximum of 15 units could be constructed on the properties. Now I can go into greater zoning detail if you would like.
Kelsey?
And then next slide, please. Oh, yes.
Sorry, if I can interrupt real quick. You might have said this and I missed it. What is the height? Is the height 35 feet on the RMF 35? Hence the 35.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I feel like
those numbers do.
But I was comparing things in my brain. Okay, and then
No, that's okay.
The R2 is 28 for a pitched and 20 for a flat.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, and the RMF 35 does not distinguish between pitched or flat. It's just 35. Next slide, please. The Planning Commission reviewed the applications on February 12th in 2020 and forwarded a negative recommendation to the City Council. There's additional information about the public process on this slide, and I can answer any questions at this time.
Council members,
Madam Chair, if I may, I neglected to mention the applicant is with us in the meeting and would appreciate an opportunity to address the council, and she also has a presentation. Sorry for the interruption.
No, please, thank you. I'm happy to have the applicant join us with her presentation this time. I think generally we give about 5 minutes for applicants. So if we can keep that time frame, that'd be great. But
hello, everybody. My name is Chowie Hoi, and thank you for your time today. Next slide, please. So as Kelsey mentioned, our proposal is to change the current R2 zone to RMF 35. This will allow us to go from 5 existing single-family homes to 16 multifamily units. Kelsey mentioned 15. We are 300 square feet short about, and the property adjacent to us, they actually are willing to work with us on giving us the 300 square feet for the 16 units. Next slide, please. This is a rendering of what we would like to build. Next slide. So why be a proponent of this request? There are currently 9 units within those 5 single-family homes, and this proposal will move that to 16 energy-efficient townhomes. It's an increase of housing stock of either 7 units, if nothing is done currently from those 9 units today, to 11 units, because there's also consideration for us to just rebuild anyway if this proposal does not go through. And so if it's left as an R2, we would demo and then just rebuild the 5 units. So the minimum gain is 7 units, and the likely gain is 11 units of housing stock. Currently, we can get market rate rents for what is there, which is $2,200 to $2,600 a house. Our original proposal was to set aside 1 designated affordable housing unit. Financing costs have changed drastically, as you may know, since we first took a look at this about 2 years ago. And we believe that we can now set aside even more affordable housing units. We're actually, we're very excited about that. And we're actually working with several different institutions to try and figure that out and nail that down. Current affordable housing units in the area are all lofts or small apartments. And we're really excited that we could be able to offer some of the first and possibly only family-centric affordable housing in the area. Right now, there is very little green space that joins, that is around the property. The area that joins all 5 houses, as shown in the pictures that Kelsey had, is basically a parking lot for our current tenants. With our new proposal, because every unit has their own private garage, it will then allow us to include green space that will surround the units proposed. And lastly, according to Neighborhood Scout, with over 90% of the homes in the area built either 1970 or before, as a result, many homes in the area are fairly inefficient. Our new build will specifically focus on energy efficiency, and we are working to a carbon neutral living space. So ultimately, that's long-term that's better for our environment as well as our community. And then last slide. We very much look forward to working with City Council in understanding future city needs and helping where we can with housing stock and affordable housing stock as well. So thank you for your time today. Are there any questions that I can answer?
Thank you so much for that. I was just going to ask council members, do you have questions for either our applicant or the planning division?
I have a question.
Okay, Anna.
Hi, how are you? Ciao. I have a question on your benefits slide that says that you would do 1 unit plus it's a 1 unit plus affordable units. I didn't understand how many. What's different than the last time you presented on this?
Yes, so financing has changed drastically in the last 2 years. And as a result, we think we are able to afford to give more than just 1 affordable housing unit. We don't have the final numbers yet. I was hoping to have them by today. I'm hoping maybe we can get them by next week or even the week after, before you guys need to make a decision. But financing options are just really different. And as a result, we think we can peel away more affordable housing for the city.
And would it be possible that, if that happens, would it be possible that you can house some of your current tenants?
It might be possible. We actually have a lot of tenants that have moved away. They've moved away basically. And so we currently have tenants in there that might, at this point, yes. The units are at market rates. And so they would either be able to afford the non-affordable housing units, and if they qualify, then they certainly, if it's the same people now, then and if they qualify for affordable housing, then yeah, they could certainly live there as well.
Thanks.
Yes, Councilmember Dugan.
When you say affordable housing, is that what size apartment and what affordable housing level are you discussing?
So yeah, that's a very good question. We specifically looked at the city's affordable housing rates. And I believe for a 2-bedroom, oh, I don't have the spreadsheet pulled up. For a 2-bedroom, 2.5 bath unit, it would be, I think it was like 1,800 or something like that, 1,200 to 1,800. I don't recall exactly. We did look at what the city's guidelines are, and we use that in our overall financing options that the banks are currently looking at right now. And with that, you know, as a result, we think we can peel off more units than just the one that we originally proposed, since this was originally put together 2 years ago.
So is that, excuse me, I'm asking more questions. Is that 80% AMI, 50% AMI, 40% AMI? Do you know?
I don't have that off the top of my head. I'm really sorry. I can certainly come back to you with that. It's I would just need to look. We specifically use the guidelines from the city website and city guidelines that Hand helped us with.
And Madam Chair, just a few more questions on that. So currently there's 9 units available.
Mm-hmm.
Are those 1-bedroom, 2 bedrooms? Are they mostly people of lower income housed there?
Right now, so of those 9 units, it's a variety of 2 bedrooms up to the largest house has 6 bedrooms actually. And they are, I'm not sure what their exact income levels are, to be honest with you. We have transitioned all of the units over to a property management company. And prior to anyone moving in, they do a background check as well as a financial credit check. And so I'm not familiar with the financial situation of our tenants, except that they have passed both credit and background checks to be able to live there.
But you're saying right now that not all the units are full, or even
at this point they're not, because we are remodeling some of them at this point. But those that are full, they are at market rates.
Okay. No questions anymore. Thank you.
Andrew?
I got a master plan question for Nick after this, but the first statement is, it sounds like the mitigation is already done, right? The housing loss is gone. If people were low income in there before, they're not there now because of the requirements from the management company. That would basically exclude a lot of folks in the low income sectors. I mean, that sounds sort of what's happened. Is that accurate to say?
Currently, yes, because we have transitioned over to a property management company. We had a lot of tenants move away just for other opportunities, and then one of the as they've moved away, then we've moved the houses to the property management company. This last house, the person who was under contract, he moved away to another state, and so that's why the last house was also transitioned to a property management company.
All right. I mean, I had major concerns about housing loss overall for these folks, but it sounds like that's already occurred, to be blunt, if I might, which is frustrating for me personally. The question, I guess, for Nick perhaps is the master plan for this area is 2005 and it's low density residential. But Second South is probably the busiest bus route in the city as far as passenger volumes on a daily basis. Is there thought about what the future of Second South Corridor looks like for density?
Yeah, I think the corridor as a whole, I don't know what it looks like as we transition east of 900 East and we start entering areas where we already have actually pretty decent density. And we also run into both the national and the local historic district. And so I'm not sure what kind of opportunities there are east of 900 East for additional density right now.
But as a whole, are we thinking of Second South as, it's probably not a monolith of a corridor, it's different sections of that corridor. Is there thought that that entirety of Second South might become more dense over time?
Yeah, I think it will, even based off current zoning. It's an interesting corridor because it does cross through two different historic districts, the Central City and the University District, and the extended University National District. So it's kind of a complex, area, but it particularly up to 500 East. I think that's something that right now most of that it goes from D1 to RMU 75 almost instantly. And there are some opportunities for redevelopment and more density for sure.
All right. Madam Chair, I guess answered my questions overall. I'm not sure how to go on this one. It sounds like the developer is going to demolish regardless. Is that accurate? Or are there other steps involved?
If this proposal doesn't go through, we are considering of rebuilding just because of the inefficiencies of the home, and we would build 5 homes instead of what then RMF 35 will allow us to do.
These aren't historic buildings in any way?
They are not. We've made sure to check.
They're located in the national district and not the local, so there's no city regulation on protecting the buildings.
I'm sorry to interrupt, Andrew. What were the years of the building?
Sorry, was that a question for me? I didn't hear
Sorry,
you.
yes, that was a question for you. The years of those buildings that are looking to be demolished.
I'm sorry. Can you say that one last time? I keep breaking up right when you ask the question.
Yes, of the buildings the homes that are looking at being demolished, what were the years that they were built?
There are several that were 1918, I think. And then the one on Lincoln Street is not nearly that old, and I don't recall. I can look it up. I'll take that down as an action item and let you know.
Thank you, Ms. Wade. Andrew, I know that Chris had a question, but were you done, Andrew?
Yeah, I'm done with my questions. A couple of concerns. One is losing those old homes. I understand the inefficiencies and the problems, and their density. We need density, obviously, in different ways. I'm on the fence about if it's an improvement to get 1 out of 16 units affordable, since we've lost the affordability in those buildings at this point already, which is lamentable. So,
and certainly, and that's one thing that I was addressing with Councilmember Valdemoros. There's actually more than one that we can peel off at this point. We just don't have the exact numbers. I'm hoping to have that to you soon, just because financing has changed since when we first looked at this 2 years ago. And our financing options have changed drastically. And so with this recent, we revisited with several institutions starting, a few months ago now. And that's when we realized we could actually afford to give more than one affordable housing unit. And that's what we're trying to figure out.
Thank you. Councilmember Wharton?
Thank you. My question's for Nick Norris. Nick, do you think that the changes that have happened regarding financing since this went through the department and the commission would potentially impact the recommendation?
The recommendation for planning?
From either group. I mean, you know them both better than me, so.
Yeah, I don't want to speak for the planning commission, but I think the bigger thing is whether or not they're occupied and if we've already lost the affordable units. I don't know if financing really is something that we necessarily weigh when we're figuring it out, but I think what we're really concerned about is the displacement and whether or not, especially, sorry, go ahead.
That's kind of what I'm asking you to speak to, is the displacement.
Yeah, so what we're concerned with displacement obviously is losing those units by an action of the city. And so when if we're considering a master plan amendment or a zoning amendment and seeing those things come in, then it becomes a little bit more of a red flag for us and a concern. Obviously right now we don't have any sort of tools to deal with the private side. And you know, what happens when property owners are increasing the rent and the costs. So we just don't know that. We don't have those tools. So we would look at it from the unit itself and losing it. And so these are, even though they may be more expensive than they were, these older units tend to still remain a little bit more affordable than a market rate new unit.
Are there other questions? Oh, sorry, Chris.
Well, I guess, and maybe I heard some of the changes that that the applicant mentioned, but I'm wondering if maybe you could speak a little bit to what changes you made in response to the public process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm happy to I'm happy to go over that. So we had a lot of responses for how the new units would look. And so we specifically we commissioned our architect to do a study, and he went out a mile from the location, and he took very specific architectural details. I believe it was the Utah Historic Commission. He specifically, because we originally wanted stone, and he came back and said, hey, do you mind making it brick? So then we changed that and made it brick. We also heard to, a lot of it was more architectural detail that the community wanted to see, and we had our architect make all of those changes, basically. We have gone through a design review with the city. There were some changes that were requested from the fire department, and we've also made those changes. There was also changes in terms of a garbage collection standpoint. I believe somebody specifically they requested something. I can't remember off the top of my head. It was quite a bit of time ago, but we did make those changes as well. And now garbage collection will be on individual property, you know, outside of each garage, you know, rather than out on the street, for instance. So things like that, everything that we did receive, that we were able to make, like architectural changes, you know, using brick instead of stone, using specific materials, having that mansard pitched roof, for instance, was also requested because there's a lot of structures with that nearby. Those are all things that we've actually incurred cost and asked our architect to make those changes for.
Okay, and then just a follow-up question, if I can.
Sure.
So why is it exactly that other than the older houses are inefficient, that you'd have to like completely demolish them? Like, was it that there needed to be maintenance over time that wasn't happening, or?
That's a very good question. We actually also had a structural engineer go and take a look at everything, and the types of changes we would like to make in terms of remodeling would be to make it easier living. As you may know, a lot of those older houses, each of the rooms are very closed off. One of the things we were looking at, especially to make it more family centric, right? You want to always have a line of sight of little kids, was to open up a lot of the floor plan. In order to do that, it would have caused enough disruption to the structure that it would have rendered them unsound. And then it would have been way too expensive for us to mitigate that. And so it was recommended by our architect as well as the structural engineer to start new.
And that's the case for all of the houses. None can be saved.
There was one that was structurally fine, but it is really small anyway. And so it's just so small. And it's the one on Lincoln Street. Interestingly enough, a lot of people in the community, they said, yeah, we're fine if you demolish that one, if you're gonna demolish any of them. And so that one didn't seem like anybody really wanted to save anyway.
Okay.
Council members, are there other questions? Dan?
Yes, could you, thanks. Could you, the 15 units or the number of units that you have, there are 16, if you get the 300 square feet. Are they, you talked about family and kids in line of sight. How many would those units be? 3 bedrooms or family size units? And what would be the makeup of that development?
Yeah, so of the 16 units, we have one that is a 1-bedroom. If for whatever reason, you know, the owners of the property adjacent to us, if they decide they don't want to do the 300 square feet, what we would actually do with that 1 unit is add that to the adjacent 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom unit next to it, and then turn that into a 3 unit, if that makes sense. So of that, if we have 3 that are definitely 3-bedroom, 2 bathrooms, 2.5 bath, excuse me. And then the remainder are 2-bedroom, 2 bathrooms. So that would be 12 units that are 2-bedroom and 2.5 baths. And all of them have their own garage underneath them. So they all have their own parking. And then in addition to that, there are spaces for visitor parking as well.
And right now, you're just looking at one of those units being affordable, but you don't know at what level yet.
We are looking at, so we're looking at more than one. And that's what we're waiting for the financial institutions, you know, depending on which one we can go with. Well, depending on which ones, we would go with the one that would give us the most affordable housing. Let me put it that way. And that's what we're waiting on. So we're definitely doing more than one. At this point, it looks like all 3 institutions would afford us to be able to do 20% of the units to be affordable housing. And we would work with City Council to decide if it's going to be a 3-bedroom or a 2-bedroom, whether, you know, which ones would be affordable. At this point, we don't know what the city needs, but we're happy to work with what the city needs and what would be best for everybody.
And sorry, you probably asked this one already, but so all the 5 units, 5 houses right now are empty.
No, they're not empty.
Okay.
No. Right now, there are 2 units that are being remodeled, but the others are all full.
They're all full.
Yes.
And they're all probably low income residents now?
No, they're not. They're all at market rates at this point. One of the other things that it's interesting that we're having this conversation. One of the things that came out of the community council was that we needed to transition everything to a property management company because it had been managed by my dad and my uncles, frankly. They purchased these houses about 30 some odd years ago when they were all condemned, and then it was their pet project and they rehabbed everything, and they've been managing them that way. With their age, they haven't been able to maintain them as much as they can, and so as a result, they've fallen into some disrepair. Some of the comments back from the community council meeting was that we need to transition to property management, like a real property management company. And so that's what we have done. And part of that was the agreement was, as a house became empty, then we would transition over to a property management company. We would, again, that's just where we are, and that's what we've done. And so all 5 units are under property management care at this point.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. White. I do have a couple of quick follow-up questions, if that's okay.
Sure.
You did mention that if the rezone was not successful and it stayed R2, that the plan would be to demolish and make 5 houses.
Mm-hmm.
Would all of those still be just for rent, or would you consider selling any of them and providing homeownership opportunities?
At this point, they would just be for rent. There is no plan for the family to sell them.
Okay. And then another question, talking about the affordable housing units, do you know how long you'd be willing to commit to keeping those units affordable?
That would again be part of this financial decision that I'm waiting on. And again, I apologize for not having that ready, but certainly I will have that soon, and I'd love to discuss that with everybody.
Okay. Those are the only 2 questions I had. It looks like Andrew has another question.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I think first thing I need to apologize. I didn't address my zoning question to Kelsey and Nick. Sorry, Kelsey. That's my fault. There's also no binding agreement if we rezone to anything that the developer is planning on. Is that correct? We rezone, there's no condition in the rezone that says they have to do these units, this type of unit, the affordability. The rezone stands alone, correct?
That's correct, unless you did a development agreement.
Yeah. So I don't want to get too in the weeds about that piece. I mean, I'm concerned about losing historical older homes in the neighborhood, balancing that with the need for affordability and a unanimous negative recommendation from the Planning Commission, frankly. So I'm not, right now, I'm not leaning towards approving it, but I'm open still to discussion. Thanks, Madam Chair.
And Kelsey did explain, sorry, I was going to say, Kelsey did explain to us that we would need to do a development agreement, and we're very amenable to that as well, if needed.
Great, thank you. Anna?
Yeah, I was going to say that because we had a similar situation in the neighborhood about these development agreements, and I feel like we have so many things to address that our community needs with affordable units, also keeping the character of the neighborhood as is, and displacement and rezones, things that the community has worked for so long to keep, the character of the neighborhood. And it's a tough for us, but we were able to accomplish it with another similar project, and I would be interested in seeing the opportunities and what the applicant brings about. But so far, I don't see a lot of many different things than from the last time we talked to. So I look forward to meeting with the applicant and see what else can be done so that our issues at the city can be addressed through this project. If not, I will rethink this. Right now I'm probably a no, but looking forward to meeting with the applicant again.
Okay, great. I do have just one quick question. This recommendation came to us literally almost a year ago. Has there been any other public outreach, either from planning or the applicant, since that planning commission back in February of 2020?
Not from planning, no.
Ms. Way, have you reached out to the community at all since that public commission? Like, has there been any community outreach on your guys' end of things? Just
Not formally, as I mentioned, as we've been turning them over to the property management company, there's been a lot of remodeling going on. And so neighbors have popped in informally, and they seem to be very excited about speaking next month, and hopefully hopefully they do voice their I guess them for it and why they would be for it. A lot of them have said, yeah, we're really excited to see new things and new development here.
great, thank you. Well, we will be having, as you mentioned, we'll be having a public hearing on this on March 2nd at our formal meeting at 7 p.m. So look forward to that hearing. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much.
With that, we will go to our next agenda item number 5, a zoning amendment at approximately 29 South Highland Drive. I think we've already heard one briefing on this, if I'm not mistaken, but we do have Brian here with us, along with Blake Thomas, Nick Norris, Nanette Larson, and John Anderson. So I will first turn it over to Brian Fulmer. Thank you, Brian.
Thanks, Madam Chair. This was on a previous agenda, but was pulled from the agenda just because of time constraints. So you saw it, but you didn't hear it yet. The property is currently split zoned, with the western portion of the parcel zoned community business, or CB, and the eastern portion, which is approximately 30%, is zoned R17000, or single family residential. The request is to amend the master plan and zoning map so the entire parcel is zoned CB, or commercial business, to accommodate a future potential development on the entire parcel. The Planning Commission forwarded a unanimous positive recommendation for these amendments to the council. And with that, I will turn it over to Nanette.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you, council. Brian, could you show my presentation, please? Thank you. The applicant and property owner with Access Architects is requesting an amendment to the master plan future land use map and the zoning map on the property located at 2903 South Highland Drive. This is amend the master plan and rezone the eastern approximate 55-foot portion of the property. The site fronts Highland Drive, which is an arterial street, and Zenith Avenue, a local street. Arterial streets generally allow for high traffic movement with higher speeds, while local streets are less trafficked with lower speeds. The site is located in the Claremont subdivision plat, which was created in approximately 1910. At the time the site and surrounding sites were subdivided, they were all platted as residential lots. At some point, the site was split zoned and the portion along Highland Drive was rezoned to CB. It doesn't appear that the eastern portion of the site was ever developed as a residence, and as far back as 1951, the west portion of 2903 South Highland Drive was zoned commercial, while the east portion of the lot remained residential. Next slide, please. Thank you. The property is part of the Sugar House Master Plan and is split designated as low intensity mixed use on the western portion and low density residential on the eastern portion of the property. The request would amend the eastern portion of the property from low density residential to low intensity mixed use. The property is also split zoned on the zoning map. The western portion is currently zoned commercial business and the eastern portion is zoned R1 7000, or single family residential 7,000 square foot lots. The request would rezone the eastern portion of the property from R1 7000 to commercial business. Next slide. The site houses the Visual Art Institute building, which faces Highland Drive. The portion of the property proposed to be amended is used as a parking lot and is non-conforming to the underlying zoning district of the R17 zone. During the public comment period of the review, a few comments were received by staff that voiced concerns about building height and parking requirements for the proposed rezone and future development of the site. As reviewed in the staff report, the building height and parking requirements in the CB zone are generally similar to the single-family residential uses to the north and east of the subject site. A landscape buffer of 7 feet from adjoining residential property required for any development in a CB zone. Further, the CB zone requires that a design review is reviewed by the Planning Commission if the new development is over 7,500 square feet building footprint. This review would include whether the design of the building is compatible with the surrounding development in regard to height, massing, vehicle access, landscape buffers, and building setbacks. Next slide. Thank you. The proposed amendments are to accommodate a future development on the entire property of 2903 to provide a concept land use drawing. The concept land use the applicant provided is a townhome development with 3 separate structures. While a concept land use and drawing are helpful in understanding the development potential of the site, the developer is not obligated to carry out the land use or concept drawings if the amendments are approved. Staff has found that the petition for the master plan and zoning map amendment meets the standards and criteria in Title 21A and recommends that the City Council follow the recommendations of the Planning Commission when they heard the application on May 13th last year to approve the master plan and zoning map amendments. And I saw Jim Nilsson here as a panelist, and I will be available for any questions, and the applicant, Jim Nilsson with Access Architects, appears to also be available.
Thank you, Nanette. And Jim, I don't know if you want to take a few minutes to address the application.
Yes, please. Just a couple of comments, if that helps. The Planning Commission heard from my business partner, Pierre Lang. He could not be here. I am glad to make just a few comments. Now, let me just read a couple things for you that we gave to that we presented to the Planning Commission. The goal is to have a single zone for a single parcel so that we have the ability to use it in a rational way. Even if it's not rezoned, we would probably, in this request, something would have to happen because the border is very irregular and difficult to work with. We're looking to create and support a more walkable community, and that rezoning will help us to do that by bringing what I like to think, I'm on the board of Envision Utah, and we always look at finding a way to provide residences an ability to live in communities that otherwise might not be possible. And by that, although these are going to be market rate units, they will be smaller than a single family home by a reasonable amount, and they'll encumber less land. And so they will be a more affordable option for my children, your children, people that move and want to be in this neighborhood than to move straight to a single family home. It's well suited because of its location between Brickyard and Sugar House, we noted, for a low density multifamily project. In this case, a single family attached project. It's almost identical, we should note, to a zoning request that
Oh, Jim, I think you cut out. I don't know if you can hear us, but we can't hear you. Okay, council members, I'm gonna give Jim hopefully a chance to maybe reconnect with our link. Sounds like there might be, and if he pops back in, we'll make sure to get the rest of his comments. But does anyone have questions for Nanette? Yes, Andrew, sorry.
It's okay. And then going back to that slide with the proposed 3-story complex, I know they're not tied to doing that on that property if it's zoned that way. Would the scale of that prompt the design review process? Can you tell from their drawings and their sketch kind of thing?
You know, based on the size of the lot, I think any development that meets the density allowed in the CB district would be required to go back to Planning Commission for a design review. But I'm not 100% sure. They did not give me the square footage that they were looking at for the townhomes on the concept plan. But based on the size of the lot, it appears that it probably back to Planning Commission for a design review.
I know, I'm not going to hold you to that, sorry. Just give me a sense, that's all. I guess my concern then, council members, is I want to support projects like this. I think they make sense in these locations. What doesn't make sense is how can we find a way to give any sort of buffer to a single-story home that's going to be 14 feet away from a 3-story building, a wall essentially to the west. There's got to be a way we can have the density and give a little bit of sort of cushion to a house like that in some way. Is there a way we can sort of do that in the existing zoning, or is that a whole big can of worms?
So it would depend on one, there is the possibility that it would be going back to Planning Commission for a design review, and that's something that Planning Commission is able to review, is the allowed building or wall height of the proposed building that's adjoining to the neighbors. They would also be able to review the landscaping. There is a 7-foot landscape buffer, but it would require that in order to regulate that, it would need to go to a design review back to Planning Commission. Planning Commission forward a positive recommendation without any conditions applied to the proposed rezone, but another option is a development agreement where some of those items are addressed through a development agreement.
Could a form-based zone be a more effective way to do this rather than go back to development agreements?
So I'll jump in with that, and I think the form-based code has better buffering requirements than our other zoning districts, and frankly, our buffering requirements are not adequate. As you pointed out, most zones have that minimum of 7 feet, and there's not really options to increase that in our code. So I think it's a bigger project that needs to be looked at so that we don't have to put everything through this kind of process and discuss development agreements on site-specific types of things like this. But this is the CB zone is one of the few zones that specifically grants the Planning Commission the authority to increase that buffer through the design review process. Most zones do not have that, and so it's a little bit of a unique situation, and that was added in response to a development in the 9th and 9th neighborhood, but it's proving to be more effective than our other buffering requirements in other zoning districts.
Okay. I mean, I'm not opposed to unifying the zoning on those 2 parcels. That makes sense. And it could be not a problem at all based on the way they orient their buildings eventually. But it just seems like we could maybe figure out a way to have this be more consistent across. We're going to have the same issue across the city, I'm guessing, all over the place as we get more dense. So, all right. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Andrew. I see Jim's tile. Jim, were you able to rejoin us? Can you hear us?
Yes, I was probably talking to the wind. I apologize. I must have had a bad connection.
Not a problem. I'm not sure where we were unable to hear you. If anyone remembers the last thing you heard, so Jim doesn't feel like he's just repeating himself.
If I am thoroughly forgettable, that's okay. If you'd rather just leave it wherever I left it, I probably got enough in, okay?
That's fine. Maybe if you'll just stick around, if council members have questions directly for you, maybe that would be most helpful.
I'll be here as long as I can, as long as my internet service provider agrees to it.
Sounds good, Jim. Council members, does anyone else have questions? Well, Jim, it looks like you might be off the hook. I don't see any hands going up. So this is also set for a public hearing. Again, next month on Tuesday, March 2nd at our formal meeting at 7 p.m. So thank you for joining us, Jim, and thanks for the presentation, Nanette.
Thank you.
Great. We now are on to agenda item number 6. It's a resolution regarding HUD and CARES funding. This is a follow-up from a briefing that we had on January 19th. And that's it. I thought I was going to say more, but there's a period at the end of that. Okay, at this table, at this time we have Ben Ledke from the council office, Blake Thomas, Lonnie Eggertson, Jennifer Schuman, and Tony Milner. So I will turn it over to Ben.
Thanks, Madam Chair. This is the second briefing on the CARES Act HUD grants. The council is scheduled to take a potential vote on February 16th. At the last briefing, the council reviewed the process up to this point, the federal deadlines, which are worth repeating. The funding must be under contract with community partners by May 17th for ESG, the Community Solutions Grants, which are targeted at homeless prevention and assistance, and June 1st for CDBG, the Community Development Block Grants. So again, May 17th and June 1st. The council also reviewed the funding categories within the grants and the individual applications. If the council were to agree and adopt the mayor's funding recommendations, there are significant remaining funds, which is a situation we've never had with HUD grants before. $468,000 for CDBG would be remaining, and $460,000 for ESG. This is almost $930,000 in total. So there are 2 items before the council for discussion today. One, is the council comfortable adopting some or all of the funding recommendations for the applications that were received? And 2, how does the council want to proceed with those remaining funds? The council asked a number of questions last time about the remaining funds and potential uses, and hand staff has updates on some of those. So as a reminder, the council was interested in if the health department could use funding for vaccine distribution. And this was one of the recommendations from the resident advisory board, was to use the remaining funds to facilitate vaccination efforts in underserved and low-income communities. The council also asked about the Salt Lake Valley Coalition to End Homelessness, if they could use the funds, as well as Nourish to Flourish, their ability to scale up operations, providing food through participating restaurants to low-income communities, as well as if the grant funds could be used to purchase property to provide emergency pandemic housing. And I'll turn the time over to Lonnie and Tony with updates on those 4 council questions from the last briefing. And we do have the funding log available to screen share if there are specific questions on any applications.
Thank you,
Thanks
Ben.
very much, Ben. Oh, excuse me,
No.
Council Chair.
You're fine. Go ahead, Lonnie. Sorry I interrupted.
You're right on target. Ben has been kind enough to provide in your staff report or in the staff report more detail about all of the topics, the questions that the council had last week. And I would like to just outline the things that we have learned in the past week that would fill in some of those gaps related to the various questions that came from council. First, as kind of a point of personal privilege, I really appreciate being able to hire. We have 3 new staff that are going to be implementing the HUD CV dollars. 2 of them started yesterday, and another will be starting 2 weeks from yesterday. So we will be fully staffed to be able to take forward the council recommendations, council appropriations as those happen. So thank you. For the CDBG CV funding, the dollar amount of $468,900 has not been requested by the applicants during the typical process. The council requested information related specifically to food insecurity programs. And since the last briefing, we have confirmed that the Salt Lake City Corporation or Sustainability application that was in conjunction with United Way, the International Rescue Committee, and Comunidades Unidas can expand the initial application to provide more emergency food delivery. The Shelter the Homeless application was not scalable, according to the applicants and our follow-up conversations with them. And then thirdly, the Nourish to Flourish folks were contacted, and they could use any of the $468,900 that council deems appropriate to provide to them, as they've utilized all of their CARES Act funding from Salt Lake County, about $450,000, and city about $100,000, and they would be able to target providing services to our residents in the zip codes that have been most impacted by the pandemic. This program is fully scalable to match whatever funding the council may appropriate. And then secondly, the possibility of assisting with vaccinations has been outlined on page 1 of the staff report under new information. HAND staff has been in contact with Salt Lake County Health Department. As you may recall, the health department closed, or you've been able to read in the staff report if you had a chance to look at that, that they closed an application period for their request for applications related to equity and access for vaccinations through the health department. They, at the time I spoke with them last week, had about $750,000 in request for a pot of only $200,000 available. After the closure of that application on Sunday evening, they have over $900,000 in requests, and they have an anticipation of being able to provide possibilities for some of the HUD CV funding to bolster applications that they will not be able to fund. We will be meeting with the health department team tomorrow afternoon. We were hoping to have it happen before this meeting, but it just wasn't feasible. And we'll determine if any of the applications that they receive from community partners that could serve, again, the Salt Lake City zip codes, Glendale and Rose Park, that those would align with the HUD CV eligible activities. And then hopefully we would be able to anticipate having council staff have more detail that could be shared with you prior to your making final decisions on where to put this excess money. I hope that those funding numbers would be able to be with you very shortly. That's all of the CDBG information. If there are questions on that, I'd be happy to try and answer them.
Yeah, let's do those questions for now. If there's more information on other funding, we'll get to that after these questions. I think that's the best way to handle it. Questions, council members? Dan?
So Lonnie, you're telling us that we have places to spend that $460,000. Do you have a recommendation on how you would, or what's your recommendation on how you would split that money up amongst those 3 possible recipients?
So I actually feel like I need to have Tony step in because he's the one that spoke to especially sustainability folks. Tony, if you don't mind.
Sure. With sustainability, they just said that they could go for an increase. We didn't go into exact details for a budget. They'd be happy to entertain that kind of conversation with staff. Talking to Brian Jones over at Nourish to Flourish, they could take all of it. So what we could do, basically do based on council's guidance, we would go back and just work with the individual applicants on what would be scalable, doable for their organizations, down to the available penny that we have.
So, sorry, Madam Chair, is there a priority, or would you say Nourish to Flourish would be the first priority, sustainability and the vaccines? Would that be an order, or do you have an order that you would recommend prioritizing the funds?
So sorry, Councilman Dubin, who was that?
I was directed either at you or Lonnie. Tony, sorry.
I'll speak to I don't have a preference. They are both capable, committed, and proven organizations.
It may be helpful to have details on the number of people served for each of these different uses. That information has been provided for other applications, such as the number of individual meals that could be provided, or the number of sites that a vaccine distribution application might be able to provide on the west side. I think those details would be helpful for the council to compare the applications.
I'm sorry we don't have those exact numbers yet, but we hope to through this coming few days.
Thank you.
Other questions on the CDBG funds? One of the things I would be interested in, Lonnie, is, I mean, for me, probably my number one I mean, all of them are high priorities, but the vaccine obviously is a high priority for us. And you mentioned, so the health department put out a call for applications for partners to help the equitable distribution of the vaccine, right? And they received over $900,000 worth of applications, and for a $200,000 pot. Have they decided which applicants will receive money and funding?
So in my conversations with Caroline Moreno, she is the health department staff that is responsible for this very specific equitable access to vaccination program. She said that there were a couple of the applicants that asked for a lot, that there is no way that they could fund those. But all of the nonprofit entities have said that they would be able to use a portion of what they asked for. It's very typical with the funding grants that we see come through for pass-through for city, right? And she did say that they would not be able to obviously have as much impact if they spread the dollars more thinly.
And you're having a meeting with them this week?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. I will come back to that at the end of our discussion. Did you have other information on the other 435,000? Did you want to skip to that now, Lonnie?
I'd be happy to. As been mentioned, it's a very similar dollar amount. So personally, I've had a little bit of like making sure 468,000 CDBG, 460,000 and change for ESG. This dollar amount, the additional funding, we've spoken with the three applicants that specifically could assist in vaccination rollout and assistance. ESG, as a reminder, is for homelessness response. And so this would be additional funding for vaccine education and outreach that would be specific to our homeless population, including follow-up for a second vaccine shot, transportation, those kinds of things specifically were what were mentioned when we had those conversations. The 3 applicants are 4th Street Clinic, Volunteers of America, and Soap to Hope. And we've had conversations, and when I say we, our team, have had conversations with each of those community partners, and they are able to accept more. And I guess in maybe a preemptive attempt, Dan, Councilmember Dugan, we would just say, let's split that 460 between the 3. And Tony can slap me virtually to say, no, that's not right, Lonnie, if that's not right.
Just to add, yeah, we would work with those 3, for example, and making sure that, again, staffing capacity could meet the deadlines and meet the objective of council's direction.
Great. Are there questions on the ESG funding? Okay, I see no hands. So we are set to take action on February 16th. Ben, I'm turning to you real quick on something. So we could, for the applications that we already have allocated some money, and I guess maybe Ben and Lonnie, we could vote yes on everything that's been allocated and then come back to the 935,000 and then do another vote for that before any deadlines are up. I just don't want this money to sit there and not start rolling it out if we're okay with what's already been allocated and just kind of need to figure out that other unallocated money. So that process is, we could do that process, correct?
Yes, the unallocated funds and the funds that have applications, you can move forward on those separately. They don't have to be decided together. You have that flexibility. Ideally, we'll have more information in the next week about what Lonnie mentioned in the meeting tomorrow with the health department, as well as following up with details from the other organizations on how many residents would be served if they received additional funds. And we could come back potentially at the next council meeting next Tuesday to review that information. And then you'd be able to act on both the unallocated funds and the applications on February 16th. If for some reason we don't have that information, you'd still be able to act on the 16th for the funds that have applications and take additional time to consider your options on the unallocated funds.
Okay. I think what I'd like to do is if I could ask Lonnie and Tony if they would be able to be available, put you on the agenda again next week because you just can't get enough of us. But with the ESG funds, if we sort of know that those 3 applicants could, and this is my opinion, if somebody on the council disagrees with me, raise your hand and say, no, that's not what you want to do. But if we already sort of know that they could handle an increase in their budgets and you could work with them, perhaps you could come back next week with a new number for each of them that includes that 460,000 unallocated from the ESG funds.
Council Chair, I think that would be totally doable and we would be happy to do that.
Andrew?
Thanks, Madam Chair. Can I ask a clarifying question for Tony or Lonnie about the expenditure deadlines for those funds? I know the allocation deadlines are coming up in May and June. What are the expenditure deadlines on?
Tony's my expert. Go, Tony.
So the current all HUD CV funds need to be expended by September of next year, so 2022. However, there is a component that ESG, our total ESG amount, needs 20% of that needs to be spent by this September.
I asked that, Madam Chair, because the vaccines aren't available yet for a majority of the unsheltered or homeless populations, but when they are available, it's going to be a mad rush to get enough staff in time to make these happen. So I can see the need being less immediately, but in a month to 2 months or 3, depending on when the health department has vaccines, it'll be a major need. So I would support the move you're suggesting.
And Tony and Lonnie, can those ESG, I remember us having this discussion last week, but I can't remember the answer. The HUD and the ESG funds, or all the HUD funds, cannot be spent on personnel, correct? Or it can be?
So ESG can cover personnel.
Perfect. So for example, you could start, if we allocated this now, these different organizations could start hiring and training so that when we get vaccines, as Andrew mentioned, they're already ready to hit the ground running. And then we would hopefully meet this September deadline of that 20% in that form or fashion. I mean, if everything works in an ideal world, which is 2020 has taught us there is nothing ideal. There's no existence of that. But right, I mean, if everything happened the way it was supposed to.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
I'm not sure, Madam Chair, if there'll be hiring going on since these are one-time funds and no agency wants to hire people to lay them off in a few months. It might end up being more of direct client care costs or overtime costs or those kind of things for existing staff, I'm guessing. But that's just a guess.
Sure, I'll leave it to the people in charge. Okay, so perhaps we can come back, put you guys on an agenda for next week, have a little bit more information, and then hopefully at least with the parts that are already allocated, be able to take action the next week on the 16th at our formal meeting. Does that sound like a plan for everyone?
Can do.
Okay, great. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for all your hard work and getting these questions answered. And it's kind of nice having extra money to figure out how to spend and not having too few dollars figuring out how to give out, how to spread them as much as we can.
Madam Chair, one more update. At the last meeting, you'd requested a graphic or a simple way to show all the different federal funding that the city has been receiving during the pandemic. And I just wanted an update that we've put together a table showing that, and we're working with our PEC team and our amazing Amanda Lau and her graphic talents to put that in a friendlier format. And so we hope to have that for you later this month.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Well, if there are no other questions for Lonnie and Tony, we are at item number 7, which is a break. And we are 10 minutes early for that break. I'm still only going to give you a 20-minute break so that we maybe can finish up before and have a longer break before our formal meeting and actually allow everyone to get some dinner with their families. So 20 minutes, be back here in 20 minutes, be on time, or that's it, you get a demerit. James is not going to be able to join us until later this evening. So we will get right on going. Are we back recording and on TV and all of the things? I'm taking that as a yes. So we are on agenda item number 8. It is the rezone at 1301 and 1321 South State Street. We have Brian Fulmer Brian, today is your day. It's all you. From the council's office, Blake Thomas, Nick Norris, and Katia Pace as the principal planner. So I will turn it over to Brian and we'll go from there. Thanks, Brian.
Thanks, Madam Chair. It's nice to spend so much time with you all today. This is, as you mentioned,
wait, Brian, I'm going to interrupt you real quick. Is this weird thing happening? Is it happening on anyone else's computer between the mayor and Nick Norris's tiles? Nick Norris's tile looks like it's going to give me a stroke because it keeps putting the mayor's tile on top of it. Okay. Thanks, Nick. Sorry, don't know what's going on. Okay, take it away, Brian.
Okay. This is zoning map amendment for properties at 1301 and 1321 South State Street. They are currently zoned CC, which is corridor commercial, and the request is to change the zoning to FBUN2 or form-based urban neighborhood 2. An amendment to the zoning table is also requested to add this corner to other named locations eligible for increased building height under the FBUN2 zoning designation. You may be familiar with the area. This is where the Coachman's Restaurant is located, and a 2-story office building is also on the site. The applicant indicated intent to replace the existing buildings with a new mixed-use building, which would include ground floor commercial space and owner-occupied condominiums above the commercial space at a price point which would be attainable to a wider range of potential buyers. And let's see, the Planning Commission forwarded a unanimous favorable recommendation to the council for the proposed amendments. And that recommendation also included a condition that the 2 parcels be consolidated before the ordinance is published. And with that, I will turn it over to Katya.
Good afternoon, City Council. I would like to start my presentation with a slide, and if that can be arranged. So try not to repeat too much what Brian just explained to you. Can I have next slide, please? You know, this is a zoning amendment so that the applicant can consolidate the 2 parcels, remove the existing buildings, and build a mixed-use building, owner-occupied and financially attainable. Next slide, please. The Planning Commission recommended City Council approval for this rezoning. Next slide. This is an aerial photograph of the area with Coachman's being here in the corner, and then a commercial 2-story building here in the south. Next slide. This is just visual of the corner of 13th South and State Street, and with the commercial building on the side. Next slide. This slide shows the current zoning and very close adjacent properties, and there's the zoning on those properties. Next slide. As you can see, this corner here, the properties, the subject properties are CC, commercial corridor. And as you can see, State Street is mostly zone commercial corridor from 9th South down to 21st South. This corner is a very crucial corner for the city. It's a very important corner. It's, State Street is a gateway to Salt Lake City, and 13th South is a major arterial street that connects the east and west sides of the city. And as you can see, it also kind of transitions from a more commercial area to a more residential area. Next slide. So in order to make findings for this rezoning, we looked at the master plans applicable to this area. And as you can see here, Plant Salt Lake, some of the goals is access to a wide variety of housing types, basic human need for safety and social interaction and services needed for the well-being of the community. Then going to the Central Community Master Plan, it talks about the urban design requirements to improve the quality of living in the central city, a need for safety, new mixed-use designations to support livable communities. And then next slide. This area also is part of the RDA project area, and as such, the plan for that area is to have higher aesthetic support for population growth and mixed-use development options for increased residential capacity. This area also is part of a study that was done between South Salt Lake and Salt Lake City. It's still as a draft. It hasn't been adopted yet, but some of the goals for that plan talks about more density along State Street, more height, development that better engage the sidewalk and street. Next slide. Next slide. So if you keep in mind the goals of the master plans, we'll talk a little bit about the zoning comparison. If you can, look with more detail here, you'll see that the CC zoning requires more setbacks, more parking, and less height and density, even though it is part of the South Salt Lake Street corridor, which exempts front yard setback. It's still the maximum setback is still more than the FBUN2. So it shows, a comparison how much more, and also the design, which is the next slide. Next slide, please. You see that the FBUN2 has a lot more design guidelines than the CC zone, even though, the South State Street corridor overlay has, an additional 3 guidelines, design guidelines. It's still the FBUN2 definitely incorporates a lot more design regulations. Next slide. And you'll see that, this is the development that the CC zoning has. It's the result of what the CC zoning has allowed on that corridor, with properties that are a lot, shorter because of the height goes up to 30 feet. The type of land use, such as gas stations. Next slide. With drive-throughs in, next slide. And a lot more parking in front of the property. So the CC is also a lot more permissible, and so the land use that is surrounding this property, reflects what the CC allows in that as a zoning district. Next slide. More of the adjacent properties, and to the subject property. Next slide. STEP finds that the development under the CC zone does not encourage the type of the development that the different master plans call for. Next slide. The type of development in the FBUN2 has a potential for additional housing because of the height that would be allowed. Because of the more density, it's more sustainable. It's safer, especially in this area where safety is a concern, because of the interaction on the ground level, and it would be better designed. Next slide. And finally, in order, some of the properties on the FBUN to allow for a higher height on some specific corners, and what is allowed is 50 feet, but in some corners, the height can be up to 65 feet. We're proposing that this corner be one of those sites where the corner can go up to 65 feet. But in order to allow that to be zoned, and indicate that in the zoning ordinance that it can go up to 65 feet, the two parcels should be consolidated. So it's one parcel in the corner. And with that, I finalize my presentation, and I am open for any questions.
Thank you, Katia. Do we have questions?
I have a question, Madam Chair.
Yes, of course, Anna.
Hey, thanks, Katia. This looks great as far as I know. I'm looking at what the applicant is proposing, and it says he has an intent to replace existing buildings with a new mixed-use building, including ground floor commercial space and owner-occupied condos above at a price point attainable to a wide range of potential buyers. And I love that, and I think it's something that we need in Salt Lake City. We need housing in general, but I like that these are condos. And I know that applicants usually, will come over and tell us this is what we would like to do. And sometimes it happens and sometimes it doesn't. And I'm leaning towards how can we assure or make sure that these actually, these condominiums actually happen. Is there, do you know if they're for sure it's going to happen, or if we can do a development agreement, which I know we talked in the past, we're not sure about them, but I would really like to see this, and I would, I don't know, I really want this to happen. So how can we make this happen?
I'll let the applicant answer more of this question, but at the same time, I just wanted to say that the applicant is trying to have a zoning where no additional process is going to be required. So we can't just say, it's going to go through, a plan development, for example, or, there will be a condominium plat that will need to be approved as, an additional process, but nothing else. So I'll let the applicant, talk a little bit more about, what they can assert the city council.
Hi, my name is Mike Nichols, and my father and I have owned that property for, let's see, since 1975 is when he bought the one parcel Coachman's is on, and the other parcel we bought back in 2010. Tell times have changed a lot since then, and a lot of things have happened in that area. I'm aware of that. That building to the south of me, the office building, is in dire need of I have to either refurbish it or I have to do something different there. It's not conducive with the times right now. It's got breezeways. It's got just a bunch of mistakes that were made back then, unfortunately, and I'm living with it right now. So either I have to do something to a larger degree, which to me would be wonderful to just rejuvenate that whole area. It needs it so desperately bad. And I want to hope that it'll clean things up and keep things a lot safer and better. And I'm not trying to complain or brag or anything, but I kick at least 5 people off of the property every single day that are doing drugs, right in front of children, right in front of other things. It's not a good scene. So, I mean, I really want to change that whole atmosphere there. It's not good for the area. And yeah, that's absolutely my intention. Just like the Coachmans, my father's mantra has always been to, give the most for the best and at the best price you possibly can. And that's exactly what we want to do with those condominiums there. I'm looking at, a wonderfully affordable and great spaces, and you're right close by to the city center, and you've got you've got the ballpark, you've got Liberty Park, you've got 13th South entrance for freeway, you got State Street entrance for freeway just further down. I mean, really, it's a wonderful location, and it's almost kind of the gateway to the city center, and I'd like it to be that way, and I'm hoping to do that. You asked me for, some type of a solid verification. I would love to give that. I mean, I've been trying to, I've been working on this for a long time. And I just want you to know that I've taken a lot of things into consideration. At first, I started with the city and looked into a hotel there because I'm obviously in the hospitality industry, and I thought that might, be conducive for me. But when I seen how many hotels were going up and permits requested and everything for hotels, I decided that wasn't the right, thing. Then I started thinking apartments, but then I didn't like the apartment idea because I want ownership so that people are going to care about what they're doing and what they're seeing on the streets there, just like I do with my own businesses. I don't want anything to happen there that shouldn't be, okay? And I want it as safe as possible. And my design is definitely going to keep all that in mind. Of course, that will have to go through the city planners and everything, but my ideas are always trying to keep safety and beauty and just a whole bunch of things in mind when we're doing this. And of course, cost is a big one. I want it affordable. I'm not trying to make super expensive units there. That's not my goal. I'm trying to make the best for a super reasonable price. That's exactly what I want to achieve.
Thank you so much, Mr. Nichols. It sounds wonderful, and I'm excited to see something awesome happening there and with this new zoning. So thank you for having that spirit and desire to help our community. Thanks.
Darren?
Thanks, Madam Chair. Yeah, I'm also really excited to see something happen on this corner. The corner is kind of there's frequent problems around that corner, so a catalytic development that would help revitalize that area is much welcomed, and I'm really excited that something's happening. I have a couple questions specific to the zoning that I don't know if Katya maybe could help me sort of just sort through in my brain. The parcel, so form-based urban 2, and I think I know why that was chosen, because I don't think there's really a good sort of middle ground between what there currently is now and what the developer's trying to do. I think we saw that last year with Cleveland Court, where they used form-based urban 2, and it doesn't feel like the perfect fit because it's not really close to tracks or things like that. So my question is, as we start to use form-based urban 2 in places outside of Central 9th where it was started, what are our thoughts about how that continues? And specifically, I'm thinking forward to the off-street parking ordinance that we have coming forward. And again, I don't want to be a person that's advocating for more parking in the city, but the whole ballpark commercial corridor area is in the general context, which is the most required parking, and form-based urban, I believe, will be in the least required parking. So to me, there's like a big disconnect that we have one parcel that is going to be zoned in a way that requires no parking. And I may have some of those details wrong, but maybe just help me sort through that. Katya, if you would, why this was considered the correct zone choice for that parcel.
Well, you're right that, the FBUN2 does not require parking, and so parking, the CC requires a lot more parking. But also 13th South, if you go down a couple blocks, you're going to have, a track station fairly close to it. And there are a lot of buses going through State Street. They're not the ideal buses because they're not, they're more regional buses than it should be. I think that with the State Street, life on State Street, it calls for more local buses to be in that area, which is an ideal area to have, a transportation center hub. Well, not center, but, a lot of transportation, especially local.
Thanks. Yeah, and I think that actually what you're saying is true, that it makes sense to have more frequent transportation along State Street, and then if that can connect to 13th South to the track station, that could become a really great sort of redeveloped part of the city, and this might be a great first project for that. And I think I just want to think through what the current zoning is and the things that we're going to be considering soon. So maybe that's just my flag in the ground for, I think that the proposed changes to that neighborhood, I think we need to think that through a little bit more. So I'll address that again when we actually talk about that ordinance, but it feels like just a kind of a weird fit, but I like the idea of that parcel moving forward.
Are there other questions? Andrew?
Thanks, Madam Chair. I mean, I agree with the comments earlier. I like the project. Point of just personal request. If we could write in some way to reuse the Coachman's sign for a logo for a placemaking kind of piece, that would be very important to me personally, just a small piece about the neighborhood. But I'm sure we can talk that out offline. Katya, if you go back to one of your slides, you showed the west side of State Street across the street from it. And you showed examples of 3 buildings in there that are next to Wayne's Corner going south, I believe. There's the Christian School, Anti-Trans mural, and then another one right next to it. This is sort of, in the context of the neighborhood, I guess my question is FBUN2, which Darren just talked about, what's being considered or thought about in general for that whole neighborhood on State? Because one of the things that attracts me to that place is the potential for that west side of the street to have really interesting facades, single story facing the street for small business. And if you go higher, you got to go behind it up, kind of like a form-based kind of setback. Is that sort of the thought around there as well, or are there other options that you're thinking about if people were to present to the city?
The whole area is supposed to be looked a little bit more carefully once the Life on State master plan is adopted. And I believe that that's when my indication, that I got from management is that area, the whole area is going to be looked for a more consistent zoning that might, fit for that whole entire corridor. But Nick, you can respond that.
Thanks. So Koch is right. We are trying to work into our work program for the year, a look at the zoning on the State Street corridor as a whole. One of the unique things about it is that we have the State Street overlay zone, which right now is a, lack of a better term, kind of a design standard overlay that applied to State Street. And as we rezone that, a lot of those design standards are going to be duplicative based on future zoning. And so we have the opportunity to use that overlay and make changes to it at the exact same time to address those types of things. If there's a way that we can find a way to keep some of the more unique building placements and facades and have development behind them, that's something that we could consider as part of that project as we look at both the overlay and whatever the future zoning for the corridor may be. And it may be different based on where on the corridor we are.
Yeah, I'm looking at this, and the Coachman's and the plaza next to it are really the old sort of parking out front, big setbacks, exactly what we don't kind of want there. But if the only alternative is the close set glass and steel facade that goes straight up 60 feet, I'm not sure that's, it's better in some ways, but it's not necessarily a great community still. And so figuring out how did we get the old buildings, because like I said, right across the State Street from there, excluding maybe the Wayne's Corner service station, there's some great structures if they were incorporated and kept, could add the character to that community to be important. So that's on my mind. The other question is sort of a little outside the scope of this, but I want to bring it in if I could for just a second. The FPUN2 zone allows up to 65 feet?
Only on the corners. So
Only on the
some
corners?
specific corners, not all the corners of the FPUN2.
And then it drops down to 50?
50 is the zoning, and then there's a requirement for a setback after the ground level of 15 feet when it's facing the street.
Okay. I'm in favor of that. My concern is that in the same neighborhood, there's a CG zone. It's mostly, what is it, west of, Main Street maybe? I can't recall now, Darren, maybe you know better than I do. There's a big swath of CG up sort of the west side of the city up to I-15. And there was a proposal recently on Brooklyn Avenue, not too far from here, that was sort of, they're petitioning for conditional use, but up to like 77 feet on a very narrow street. It's not a State Street width, it's a side street. And it seems like that's going to go through, which would be 77 straight up without any setbacks or stepbacks really. And it seems like there's some problems in how we're thinking about the side streets in the CG neighborhood, part of this neighborhood, and maybe a major thoroughfare on State Street as far as height and setbacks and stepbacks. So is there any discussion about the CG zone in this neighborhood and looking at alternatives that might be more compatible to narrower side streets?
The answer to that is yes. So we, just like we hope to do with State Street, we're also trying to work in zoning changes along 300 West to correspond with the change in the street as that street is rebuilt and it becomes more conducive to other modes of travel. And so we do plan on incorporating that so that while that street's going through that construction process, we're going through the rezoning at the same time. But that is certainly something that we could consider. That it's a little bit outside of what this request is, but yeah.
Yeah, I understand. I'm sorry to sort of, I don't want to convolute this request because I think it's a good step forward for this corner. I agree with that. I'm just looking east to west and saying on 13th, if we went from State Street, which is a major thoroughfare, obviously, and a max height on a corner of 65 dropping to 50, But if you go further west to Third West, and we could have some max heights that exceed 70, it seems like it's a little off kilter, I guess, in some ways for the neighborhood. For going the opposite direction, we've talked about downtown going high to low. So that was my concern in the neighborhood piece.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair. I think that, thank you, Councilmember Johnson, that helped me kind of formulate what I think is sort of not sitting super well with me on this. I think the project, we need a catalytic project in that neighborhood, and so I think it should go forward. But I think my fear is that this neighborhood is just going to be the result of a sort of a patchwork of different zones based on which developers want to do what. And I like what this would do to the neighborhood, but I hope we can invest some energy into sort of a more comprehensive look at that whole ballpark neighborhood and the State Street. And I know that becomes the thing we always get is staff time. And so I some of these things are going to really have long-term effects that might not be they might be good, but they might not be as good as we could get. And so this goes back to that same conversation we had at last year's budget season. I feel like we need to make sure that we have the capacity within the planning department to do these long-range studies, because I think, to me, Form-Based Urban 2 is a zone that was really well thought through for a different part of the city, and I'm not sure that it's the exact right thing here. And I don't think it's the right thing in just one parcel. I think we need to think of the neighborhood kind of broader. Given that I know we don't have time to do that, and this project wants to move forward, I don't want to stop it from going forward, but I think we really need to invest that in.
Are there any other questions from council members? Okay, I just want to say to Mr. Nicholas that I really appreciate the thought of having home ownership on State Street right there. I mean, that is huge. You're absolutely right that when we have our city, I believe we don't have enough home ownership opportunities within the city and within new developments that are coming online. So being thoughtful of that, particularly being thoughtful of a price range that people can actually afford and live in and want to live in long term, really is what we need on State Street in this area. I know it pretty well. And I think that that buy-in that you talk about, caring about the space that you're living in because it's yours and you own it and you want it to be that home that you bought, that you paid your hard-earned money for. And I think renters are the same, but there is a difference sometimes when we have that consistency of people wanting to stay in their place. And so I really appreciate that. We're not seeing enough of it from developers of the bringing to the table the idea of home ownership. And I think it really is exactly what this area needs. So thank you. And with that, we will move on to our next agenda item. Thank you for being here, Mr. Nichols. And thank you, Katya. Our next agenda item is number 9. An ordinance regarding, I did just want to say, obviously, Mr. Nichols, you know this, but we will have public comment on Tuesday, March 2nd at 7 p.m. at our formal meeting. And now we'll move on to agenda item number 9, which is free metered parking for Salt Lake City green vehicles. This is our first briefing. So I'm going to turn the table over to Sam Owen from the council staff, Blake Thomas, John Larson, and Dan Bergenthal from Transportation.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a brief intro on this item. Salt Lake City has a program that allows relatively more energy efficient vehicles, green vehicles, electric vehicles, higher mileage vehicles. It allows those vehicles to obtain parking exemption where those, because of the sticker on the car, those vehicles can park in metered stalls downtown for up to 2 hours without paying for parking. That program started to go into effect in 2006. In 2018, so pretty recently, the administration proposed and the council adopted new standards for determining eligibility in that free metered parking program tied to a set of EPA criteria called SmartWay Elite. The new criteria adopted in 2018 significantly limited the number of qualifying vehicles on the basis that the SmartWay Elite thresholds were tied to new technologies, cleaner technologies, and so the idea was to reward the even more efficient, the even cleaner vehicles. Now the administration is proposing returning to the 2006 criteria referred to in the staff report, and I think also in the administration's transmittal as the original ordinance. So that would again expand the inclusion criteria to 2006 levels. So all of those vehicles that had been excluded as a result of the ordinance change in 2018, the adoption of the SmartWay Elite criteria, those vehicles would now be eligible for the program again. And with that, Madam Chair, I ask to turn it over to the administration to summarize the issue further and answer questions. Thank you.
Want me to take it from here?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. We have Dan Bergenthal, who has been involved with this program for a long time, and he's ready to present and answer questions on some specifics. Thanks.
Yeah, so as was mentioned, this program has been around since 2006, and it's been a very successful program. People really like it. In 2018, we updated the program because we felt there was a lot of vehicles that were qualifying for the program. We thought it might be a little bit, in the future, cars seem to be getting cleaner and cleaner, and so we just pulled back a little bit to reduce those numbers. However, as was also mentioned, we're now feeling like in order to help honor the early adopters of the green vehicles and to honor those who have purchased the vehicles that were thinking about this incentive, and that's one of the reasons why they purchased their vehicles, we're thinking that it would be good to allow them to keep participating in the program. So I have all kinds of details I can provide if you'd like to hear them, but I think I'll just kind of turn that over to you guys and see how many details you'd like to hear. So,
Madam Chair, could I jump in? I neglected to mention one important thing, if I might, for a moment here. Thank you, Dan, also. Their first policy question in the staff report has to do with whether or not the council would like to consider this amendment in the context of the annual budget, because it does have a fiscal note. So under the 2006 ordinance standards, which are again being proposed for adoption by the council, in a year like this, had it not been COVID-19, so in a normal parking year, under those more inclusive criteria, the city estimates about $90,000 in reduced parking revenue overall. Under the more restrictive criteria, the city estimates approximately $25,000 in lost parking revenue. So the estimated difference between the more inclusive criteria and the more restrictive criteria is about estimated to be, again, $65,000 a year. So I just wanted to call your attention to that. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. Council members, I'm going to turn it on over to you. Anyone? Chris.
Thank you. So I had some constituents contact me that were saying, yes, it's great that we offer these incentives, and we should do what we can to incentivize green vehicles, but you know, it's still car traffic in the downtown, and it's still, you know, what can we do to, is now the time, I think is what the questions we're getting at, is now the time to look at raising parking for non-green vehicles to try to encourage people to be engaged in active transportation? Or is my concern is that now is not a good time because of COVID and because of the downtown businesses that are suffering. But if we weren't in the midst of a pandemic, maybe you know, I would probably be pushing more on that. But I just am interested to hear. Those are my thoughts as a person that doesn't know a lot of specifics about this. But what are your thoughts? Dan and John is who I'm directing this to.
Oh. So you're talking about raising parking meter fees, is that right?
Well, that's like one idea, but I mean more specifically, like how can we encourage like other forms of active transportation is sort of a broader issue.
Well, we have all kinds of projects right now that we're working on in transportation to help encourage active transportation. So those are the kinds of things that we are really supportive of and are trying to do our best to implement in the city right now.
Madam Chair.
Thanks. I'll just chime in that Councilmember Wharton, I also heard from some of your residents in your district who very much matched the description that Dan gave at the beginning, where, you know, we created this incentive to try to bring people into these transition fuel vehicles. And then we cut them off, even though they're still transition fuel vehicles. And there's a lot of environmental arguments to be made for not requiring someone to dispose of their vehicle to get a new one to continue with benefits. And there's a lot of benefits, or there are several benefits across the state for those kind of cars. So I think it is a mixed bag, and it's hard to look at a budget increase, however slight this might be in the perspective of the entire budget. But we are very much, as you know, still transitioning, so much more transitioning to go. And I think in a very a nutshell way, we're going to have to pay to get people on the transition path, whether that's a free bus pass for Salt Lake City residents, or free fare days on certain red air quality days, or it's incentivizing people to get out of traditional fuel vehicles and into hybrids or electric cars while we're on that transition path. It's an expensive one most of the time, but I'm totally interested in hearing the council's ideas on ways to balance that scale on other types of transportation. Thanks for giving me a moment, Madam Chair.
Of course, Blake.
Thank you, Chair Fowler. I echo the mayor's comments and appreciate Councilmember Wharton's comments as well. And one thing that I've asked John and his team to think about as a 2021 deliverable is a real thorough analysis of our parking fees and structures. And so I think if we find ourselves lucky enough to potentially bring on a transportation demand management planner on John's team, potentially through kind of an expanded scope from scooter fees. If we were able to find that success, I would love to have a person in that role who's really taking a proactive look at our parking. And one of the things that is top of my mind is how we might be able, to Councilmember Wharton's point, kind of tune up or true up our parking fees to better reflect the value of those spots to increase turnover at our businesses, and then also potentially to work with UTA on what an expansion of the free fare zone might look like as a consideration. So just wanted to let you know that that is something that we're thinking about, and I have on my 2021 wish list as something that we can take on.
Thank you, Blake. Dan?
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I kind of want to piggyback on Chair Morton's comments about the fair. I would actually propose going the opposite direction and just eliminate the whole free parking. I mean, I drive a car that gets free parking, and all I'm trying to do is push it harder to make people use the public transportation. Because I'm thinking in the future of, hey, we're going to be out of this pandemic and we're going to be riding buses and we're going to be taking the front runner. So I want to kind of not go backwards, but go forward and say, let's get going now instead of back into the 2006 ordinance, when maybe in a couple of years we'll go back to we'll go to the 2022 ordinance. So I would look at it as saying, let's not step back. Let's either stay where we are or just eliminate the free parking. Now, I know that's hard for a lot of people, but I also think that maybe that will push us all as a city, UTA, and the residents to walk more, take the public transportation, ride your bike, instead of saying, oh, I'm going to get 2 hours of free parking, so I might as well drive. Because I've thought about that too. Well, I got 2 hours of free parking, so I'll just drive. So I look at that and going, yeah, I want to move forward and not take that step back to 2006. That's just my comments on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Council members, any other comments, questions? Andrew?
I'm leaning towards Dan Dugan's perspective, but until last year, I had a 2004 and a 2008 car, and then I upgraded to a 2006. There's a lot of families in my neighborhood who can't afford these cars. And so as an equity issue, if we're using this to incentivize people to buy those cars, I'm not sure that's the major reason people are going to buy those cars. I think it adds a little cherry on top to their already decision to be able to do that. But for a lot of families who are relying on cars pre-2010 for the cost and the size, I think this is a problem for them, for our city and equity. So I love the symbolic nature of it. I love that the city would take a stance and support more fuel efficient vehicles and alternative vehicles, but I think it doesn't help our equity discussion very much on a real basic level.
Madam
Thank you,
Chair.
Andrew. Yes.
I'll mention also that part of what part of the many requests that I've received to bring back in people who were early adopters and can't afford to upgrade their fuel efficient vehicles necessarily. I've heard the equity claims there, but I think that the airshed equity and inequity from areas that are in the first and second district in the city are impacted by what kind of cars are on our roads. And that was a piece of our consideration in bringing this to you today.
Thank you, Mayor. Are there any other comments from council members? I just want to leave a brief comment. I really resonate with the mayor's comments in that this is a transition, and that in some way, and a difficult one. I think, Utahns are very used to driving vehicles. I grew up in the Ogden area, and everything is that suburban sprawl where with no public transportation, really, right? And not an investment at the time that I was a kid, right? I'm not saying anything about Ogden now. But the people are addicted to their vehicles and like them and rely on them. And I think we're just now really working with UTA in a meaningful way that we've seen over the last couple of years to increase bus routes, increase our rapid bus routes. And that takes some time, and we recognize that. But I think once we get there, all of our dreams and wishes will come true in using public transportation and having the ability to use public transportation in an efficient and meaningful way in Salt Lake City. But that we do kind of have to get through a transition period in probably a couple of ways. And I think to the mayor's point and to Andrew's point is we're going to have to pay for it. If part of the equity issue is that we talked to UTA of expanding the free bus routes or providing through the city free bus fares, then that's what we need to do, right? And so I see all of the points, but I think taking something away like this, it has an incentive in some ways for our air quality, isn't necessarily just going to force people to get on the bus. Not yet. Right. And so I think we're moving in that direction and hopefully we'll get there. Those are just my 2 cents, but this is not scheduled for anything more yet. We will keep it on our radar, however. And my one last comment is, John Larson, watching you run through your green screen, your background really just made me happy inside.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My 14-year-old has an uncanny knack of playing jazz music on the piano right as I'm trying to jump in to say something, and I had to.
It was great. I appreciated it. It was like superhero-ish.
Good. Well, I'm glad I could provide some entertainment. It's a picture of Main Street back in the good old days when people could get together, and hopefully we can have more of that coming soon.
Yes, hopefully. Well, thank you, John and Dan and Sam, for this presentation. Like I said, it's not scheduled for anything, but we'll keep it on our radar. And next up, item number 10, we have, excuse me, our water and snowpack report. Hello, Director Briefer. It's good to see you. I don't have anyone from council staff listed on my agenda, so if it's okay, Laura, I will just turn it over to you.
That is great. Thank you, Council Chair. And it's great to be here today to talk about our 2021 water supply outlook and snowpack update. There are some here who have heard this earlier today. We talked to the community council chairs earlier today with a similar presentation. And we had some great discussion with them as well, and some invitations to go visit our community councils to talk more about conservation and about water supply updates. With me today, I have our Water Conservation Manager, Stephanie Dewar, and we've got our Water Resources Manager, Tamara Prue, and then our 2 Deputy Directors, Jesse Stewart and Marion Rice. And they're here with me depending on whatever questions come up around this. They have amazing expertise. I also just want to say that, the work we do on an annual basis for our water supplies and for a 50-year outlook, our staff, our team is really focused on the sustainability of our water resources for now and for future generations. So we have a very passionate and a very smart team here working on this. I do have a presentation to share, but I don't know that I can share it. Oh, thank you. Okay, so in a nutshell, we are a little bit concerned about drought this summer, just based on some of the data that we're seeing. But I do want to say that it's not all doom and gloom, and I want to say that, number one, we have benefited by the long-term thinking of our predecessors, where we have not only some direct supply sources and intakes, but also a good amount of water storage that we're a part of that can carry us through multiple drought years in a row. And so that is a high point. And then another high point is we have a community that has proven time and time again through previous drought years that they know how to conserve water, particularly during the summer peak season. Next slide, please. So this is just a little reminder of our water service area. Public Utilities provides water to more than 360,000 people in growing communities in the Salt Lake Valley. And that includes all Salt Lake City residents and businesses, community members, but it also includes large portions of Mill Creek City, Holiday City, Cottonwood Heights City, as well as small portions of South Salt Lake, Murray, and Midvale. So we do have a broad reach with our water supplies, and our planning includes this entire area. We do post our service area map online, so if anyone's interested, and wants to go see the extent of our service area, it is right there. Next slide, please. And this is also a reminder, I think you're all aware of where your drinking water is coming from in our service area, but surface water makes up the large majority of our drinking water supplies, between 80 and 90% on an annual basis, depending on climate conditions and demand. 50 to 60% of that supply comes from our local canyon streams. So that includes City Creek, Parley's Canyon, Big Cottonwood, and Little Cottonwood Canyon. And then about 30 to 40% of that surface water comes from water storage in the Provo River Project in Deer Creek Reservoir. That project was constructed post Dust Bowl droughts in 1934 to act as an insurance policy for us so that we can manage years of drought if we need to. We also have groundwater resources, and in any given year, that makes up about 10 to 15% of our supplies, and that comes in the form of deep wells and springs. The deep wells typically are turned on for the summer season and turned off for the winter season due to lower demand. Next slide, please. This is a photo of one of our City Creek treatment plant operators, Jason, and he is helping us by making sure that our water stays clean and reliable. I just put this in here because, water resource management takes on a lot of different responsibilities, and they all have to work together. And so source water protection is a major component of this, and that includes protecting our sources of drinking water from pollution, so our watershed protection in the Wasatch, our groundwater protection zones in the valley, but also protecting the city's rights to use that water. And we've been active in the current adjudication process that the state has been doing for the last few years. And Tamara works very hard on making sure that we are administering all of our water rights and filing all the right paperwork to continue to protect them. We also have water treatment systems. We've got 3 water treatment plants that are directly owned by the city. That's City Creek, Parley's, and Big Cottonwood treatment plant. And then we are, through Metropolitan Water District of Salt Lake and Sandy, also reliant on 2 treatment plants there as well. We've also got a water distribution system that's got thousands of miles of transmission lines and mains, pump stations. We've got wells and reservoirs and dams, and so quite a bit in the distribution side of things. And then we take steps at every step of the way to monitor water quality and our resources from the source to the tap. And with all of that work, you can see we exceed all of our Safe Drinking Water Act requirements, and we post that information annually as required by the regulations on our website in our annual water quality report. Next slide, please. So in determining our annual water supply outlook, the first thing we try to look at is what will we start with during this water year? And we rely on a lot of different data sources that we monitor just about every single day. But what we started out this year was not great. We have extremely low soil moisture in most of our watershed areas. The state recorded its driest and 7th hottest year on record in 2020. Snowpack, as you know, has not been normal to date. And most of Utah is in extreme or exceptional drought. The U.S. Drought Monitor chart that you see here is, I pulled that off the USDA website this weekend. And you can see a lot of dark red around the state of Utah, and especially Salt Lake County looks quite dark red. And that is exceptional drought. With that information and a few other key pieces of information, we're predicting a high probability of below average water supplies. We have a climate condition, La Nina conditions, which typically deliver less precipitation to Utah. Even if we get a dramatic change in our weather patterns, a lot of the experts are saying that snowpack will likely still be below normal by April 1st, which is the beginning of the water year. And then on top of that, runoff will be inefficient because of low soil moisture. Next slide, please. We also download data on a regular basis from the Colorado Basin River Forecast Center. That is a program of the National Weather Service and National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration. And it is a projection of the yield from our streams. And I pulled a screenshot this weekend of what's called the Six Creeks area in the Great Basin. And that includes all of our local watershed streams from City Creek to Little Cottonwood. And the averages that are being projected right now range from about 40% to 61% of average yield, water yield of those streams. Now, again, we still have more time, so we'll still be monitoring this, but that's pretty low. That's a pretty low projection for this time of year. And it seems to be tracking with some other drought years in recent memory, 2015. It's tracking with that. We've got some folks that are tracking both the stream flow and snowpack and seeing it line up with some very historic low water years. So it's important for us to be noticing it and talking about it right now so that we can plan in advance. Next slide, please. We also look at reservoir projections and Deer Creek Reservoir, which is where we receive our stored water through Metropolitan Water District of Salt Lake and Sandy, is currently at 75% of capacity. This is lower than this time last year. So we're watching that closely, and Provo River Water Users Association is watching that closely. They are managing that, and we sit on their board through Metropolitan Water District, so we're well aware of what's going on there. And reservoirs, I mean, this reservoir system is really important to us, and it does provide insurance to help us through consecutive drought years. But it is also really important for us to be wise in how we use that insurance policy. Next slide, please. So water conservation and demand management, reducing overall water use and demand during the summer peak is critical during drought years. Reducing overall water use and demand anytime is important, but during the summer peak time, it is really critical. And based on our current data, we anticipate that we may need to initiate our water shortage contingency plan this year. This wouldn't be the first time we've initiated it. I think the last one we did was 2017. And that's just when we see stream flows looking low, especially, and snowpack looking low like we see that now, we want to start getting the word out to our community that voluntary action is really important, and everyone can play a role. And so stage 1 of our water shortage contingency plan is just that, voluntary action. We've been very fortunate, and I think it speaks a lot to the ethic in our community that we've never had to go beyond stage 1 into progressively more regulation. We have stages 2 through 5 where there are more requirements in place should we need it, but we've not had to do that ever in our history that I'm aware of. It's also important to note that we have a lot of resources for you and for our community if you want to identify ways to help reduce water, just real practical ways to do so. We just recently updated our water conservation plan, which you adopted in December, and that has some great new programming to meet new goals. But we also have some really great resources on our website and through partner agencies. And of course, Stephanie is a wonderful resource to answer any questions and provide any guidance on water conservation to you and our community. Next slide, please. I just put this slide in because I think it's really important for people to know where they can get data and see it on their own as well. So we have, as I mentioned, a lot of information on our public utilities website, on our drought and water conservation pages. We partner on the Slow the Flow program, which is a tremendous resource. And then for anyone who really likes to get into the data, these are all of the most common links that we use to understand what's going on. We also attend briefings. There will be one this week actually with the Colorado Basin River Forecast Center to see what's happening locally and regionally as well. So just to make sure we've got all of the knowledge we need in order to make good decisions moving forward. And that's the end of my presentation. I'd be happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Council members, do we have any comments or questions?
I have one, but maybe if that's okay, Madam Chair.
Of course.
Laura, maybe this is a question to you, but when would it be appropriate for us to start communicating to our city residents to start thinking about conservation? Like, is there a too soon time to start talking about it, or should we just do it like right now and start alerting people a little bit and encouraging them to conserve water?
I know Stephanie has a great response to that. So
Laura, I'm happy to answer that question. We're actually meeting next week. We're devising a wide palette of strategies and messaging that we'll be putting out on social platform. And we're meeting next week to finalize that, and we'll be starting right away. So yes, Council person, you're absolutely right. We need to start now so people have a heads up that this is coming. And the message may change as our water supply situation changes, but the nice thing about social media is you can be very adaptive and responsive to that. So yes, we will be starting very soon.
Great. Please keep us updated so that we can add it to our newsletters. And
oh, thank you so much. That will be very helpful.
Anyone else? Okay. Laura, I just want to thank you and your team for this presentation and for all of the hard work that you do. I'm sure I've said it 1,000 times, but when I first became a council member, Laura made me want to be a water nerd, and I still want to be that. So I always love the data that you provide and all of the work that your team does.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your support.
Of course. Thank you.
Bye.
With that, we will hopefully move on to agenda item number 11, which is a board appointment. Is Rachel Manco with us?
Yes, I am. Hi.
Hi, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Doing well, thank you. I thought we'd be early, but turns out we're right on time.
Well, I love the conversation, so it was worth it.
Good, good. Rachel, you've been suggested to the Bicycle Advisory Committee. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your interest in that particular committee?
Sure. So I have actually picked up biking as a new hobby over the past few years, and it's just something I've become really passionate about. And it stemmed from me wanting to kind of switch up my commute options from taking the bus and the train every day. And I actually decided to move back downtown from South Salt Lake because I wanted a longer bike commute to work. And I've had friends who have expressed that they also would love to get out and bike around the city, but they're just too timid to because they're nervous. Of course, cars are scary. And that's kind of why I applied for this, just because I'd love to be able to share my input and help out where I can to get more people on bikes. And that's pretty much me in a nutshell.
Awesome. Well, how'd you get in that nutshell? Just kidding. It's from a movie. But are there any comments or questions from council members? We've gotten thumbs up. Yes, Darren.
Oh, I just wanted to say I appreciated reading your resume. It was very well designed and beautiful, and I like beautiful things. And we went to the same college for undergrad, so.
Sweet.
Well, you actually have the same as Anna, but we were in the same school, so glad to have you helping the city.
Yes, I'm happy about that.
Well, Rachel, thank you so much for your desire to work with and serve the city. I think it's always awesome when people take up these volunteer opportunities, and it certainly helps all of us. You will be on our consent agenda tonight at our formal meeting. You do not have to log in if you don't want to, but that's where we will finalize your appointment. So
cool. Well, thank you guys so much.
Thank you. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, bye.
Bye. Okie dokie, we are almost there, kids. Now, item number 12, report of the chair and vice chair. I don't think I have anything. Cindy's going to handle the announcement for me, or Jen. I'm not. Oh, there's Cindy. Hi, Cindy.
Hi.
So, James, do you have anything to report? Okay. Then I will turn it over to our executive director, Cindy Gus Johnson.
Hi. So just two quick things. One is that with COVID still making the rounds in a serious way, the chair and vice chair have asked us to keep our distance in meetings and things of that nature. So they've authorized us to continue to participate via WebEx and Zoom and things of that nature. And we want to do our best to avoid sending staff people to in-person meetings, because we have had some illness in the office, and we're trying very hard to avoid that. So we're going to be limited to the electronic until things calm down. And then there's a little piece of information on the grant holding account and budget amendment number 7. There's a grant that the fire department received, and they actually received $6,200 more than was originally anticipated. And so that will be appropriated in budget amendment number 7, if the council so desires. So that Steph wasn't exactly sure where to list it or how to list it, because it actually ties to a previously approved grant. But it's good news. It is more money in the tune of $6,200. And that's it.
Awesome.
Thank you.
We don't have a closed session today, right?
Correct.
In that case, everyone, we are done with our work session. Thank you to all of the council members and everyone that presented and participated today. And you have an hour and 15 minutes for your dinner break. So, Sylvia, I see, oh, Sylvia popped in. I was like, did I miss something? Okay, with that, we're out of here. See you at 7.